Transport and Connectivity Committee, Policy Committee. I'm going to ask members of the committee to go round and introduce themselves. So should we start with David?
Thank you. Councillor David Wilcox from Lockleys Ward.
Emma Edwards, Councillor for Bishopston and Ashley Down Ward.
Rob Breyer, Councillor for St George West.
Don Alexander, Avonmouth and Lawrence Weston.
Councillor Self, Southmead Ward.
And Graham Morris, Stockwood Ward. Chair, I won't be staying for the whole meeting because of fatigue. I'll be leaving about 6-ish, I think.
Okay, thanks, Graham. And my name's Ed Plowden, I'm chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome members of the committee, but of course the public who've turned out to see democracy in action as well. So you're very welcome. The emergency evacuation procedure. In the event of an alarm sounding, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area, out the front door, down the ramp, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. Nick, do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Sorry, to catch you on the fly.
Nicholas Coombs, Councillor for Westbury and Henleys.
So I'd like to welcome the public, as I said, who are attending, but also this is being webcast, so anyone who's watching this at home at work is very welcome as well. Just for everyone in the room, the council chamber is a room where we can have an exchange of views, but we ask that everyone speaks with courtesy and respect. Tonight we've got a very packed agenda. We've actually negotiated an early start so that we can get through it all. We really need to focus and manage our time well, so I am going to be asking everyone to try and do that very well. I'm very glad to say that Councillor Morris wasn't late, but will be leaving early. Is there any interest to declare in relation to items of business on the agenda from committee members? I'll take that as a no. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of the committee, which was held on the 20th of March, as a correct record. Can someone second that, please? I'll take David. His hand was slightly faster than Don's. Are the committee content to confirm the minutes as a correct record to be signed by me as the chair?
Thank you.
David? Oh, just if anyone disagrees with them, then say something now or forever hold your peace. Couple of announcements from me. As ever, there's been a number of officer decision notices that I have been consulted on, and those have been published in time for this. I'd like to say that last week I went to an event organised by City of Sanctuary, where we heard from asylum seekers, and they had a very clear ask of us, was that they think that asylum seekers should be granted bus passes. Given that they are asked to live on about £8 disposable income and are not allowed to work, and that sometimes they have to do things like appointments or show their papers. I think a lot of them have to go out to Patchway to show their police papers in a police station. That's a £5 bus fare. That's an awful lot every 2 weeks out of an £8 disposable income. So they made a very good case, and I will be I have promised them that I'll be discussing that with the Metro Mayor, who's I think is mainly in their gift to do that. But I thought it was worth just mentioning it here because it's something that I attended on behalf of this committee. And the other thing is, just out today is the news, which is really pleased to see, that the Clean Cities network of organisations that campaign to create child-friendly cities has ranked Bristol as 8th out of 36 cities European in being good for child-friendly streets. So from my point of view, one of the things that I've always said that makes a great city and a good transport system is that a sensible 12-year-old can walk around the city and be safe, and parents aren't very scared about their safety. So it's really nice to see that that's at least a little bit of an endorsement of that we're moving in the right direction, but let's not forget there's an awful lot more to do. So that's my chair's announcements. We move swiftly on to the public forum. We've got a number of people who've made statements. Could anyone who's made submitted a statement and is here to speak to that statement, could you just put your hand up now so that we, so David, nobody else is intending to speak to a statement? Okay. In which case, David, you've got a minute. Would you like to...
Yeah, so I'll be
from what I want to say. But the issue really is still around the buses. Helen's now taken over, and I know there's a bus working party on Friday, but we still have great gaps in the city network. If you live in the east of the city, Hillfield Wards, all around that area, the 17 and 19 buses don't do the job, and they pack in early, and they don't link Bristol Parkway, and they don't link UWE in the evenings, and they've been withdrawn in the Stapleton area. So Stapleton's in Bristol, not in South Gloss. So those two particular routes need a review with South Gloss, working with the Metro Mayor, see if we can get better connectivity across the edge of the city region and through the east of the which is a very dense, populated part of Bristol that links hospitals, links train stations, railway stations, UWE complex, into Kingswood and across the city towards Bath and towards Keynsham. So that's one of the pleas, really. The other is to move forward on the night buses and make sure that we're looking at the night buses to see if we can get at least a service on a Friday and a Saturday. We've built some, and the X14's been great up the Portway, Seamill, Sharhampton. It's good loading, but we need to get more of those and look at Brislington and Slough and areas around there where they don't have night buses. On rail, I just want to say on rail...
Do you want to wrap up now? Just maybe make this your last point.
On rail, 2 points on rail. Welcome the work on Temple Meads and the work going through today. On the other piece on rail, we got this crazy situation, which is my question as well, is about these intercity trains that are standing in sidings whilst people stand all the way to Manchester or stand all the way to Plymouth or all the way up to Edinburgh. We need to do something about this with the regional MPs and the Metro Mayor.
And I think there's a question on that as well in a moment, so you'll get, we'll come back to that. So, no other statements? Okay, shall we move on to questions? I can't see Melissa Topping here. So have we got Caroline Dunn? No. David Ridgewell, you've got questions 6, 7 and 8. So David, you have had an answer to your question. Is it on the screen now? Yes. It's just getting there. So you've asked, you're allowed up to 2 follow-up questions, David.
I suppose on the one I am really concerned about, which is, you know, connectivity, economic growth, development of Bristol's city region, and having good connectivity with Manchester and Birmingham, Plymouth, to name some of the cities, Newcastle and Leeds. We need more than the response we've got there. I mean, I want to be assured that the council's going to raise this with the Metro Mayor, with Helen Goodwin. It's going to raise this with the City Region's MPs and make sure this is raised with Western Gateway Transport. We do have levers, and that answer to me doesn't show we're pulling the levers. You know, if I was Andy Burnham, would I be accepting that?
David, could we try and turn this into a question?
So the question is, what further action can you take here to try and do something about the chronic shortage of rolling stock and there's trains stored to make sure Bristol has good connectivity with the places I've just mentioned?
I think the answer you've been given is that we work with the Metro Mayor and all of our partners, and I really can't flesh it out more than that at the moment, David. Did you want a second? I don't know if officers, Adam, did you want to add anything to that? I think we'll use all the levers that we can and encourage the Metro Mayor to do so. Do you want a second supplementary question?
Yeah, can I just see?
Do you want to just, Ian, could you just scroll down to the next, David's next answer?
Yeah, so obviously, this is in Gloucestershire, historic Gloucestershire, Bristol, part of. The cricket club's been in this city for years. Absolutely years in Ashley Down.
Let's try and make it a question, David.
So the question is, they want to move to, I believe, a site near Pilning, near the Wave. What action is the City Council going to take, working with the Metro Mayor, Western Gateway Transport Board, South Gloss Council and Gloucestershire County Council, to make sure we have a proper green travel plan for that particular location? Because that location is pretty well out in the sticks. So the question we'd like to ask is, what action is going to be taken? Is the city going to do work on this with South Gloss? Is it going to be a Wecker working pie? The club just can't be allowed to get away with this. This is absolutely fundamental.
Okay, let's get an answer to that
These
question.
National Peak Clubs work.
Alex.
Thank you. So we will, of course, work with our neighbouring planning authority and through the combined authority if we need to ensure that if the club move and to where they might move is as sustainable as possible. At the moment, the club has gone public with its intention to leave. If that's the case, then at some point in the future, the council may be in a position to determine a planning application for an alternative use of the site. Where they might choose to go to will obviously is a different issue, but clearly it's of regional significance, and we'll work with our partners to ensure that there's a sustainable package there, wherever the site might be. At this stage, it's difficult to say much more.
Thanks, Alex. I've noticed that Caroline Dunn has appeared, so Caroline, I'm going to go back in the agenda and allow you to make your statement, if you're ready to do so. He hasn't really get to do. Well, normally Caroline, we've got a very packed agenda. I'm making a special dispensation. I'm making a special dispensation for you to come and. Can we make a deal, Caroline? You can make your statement and ask your questions, or you can ask Melissa's questions and your questions. Okay. Do you want to make your statement, Caroline? You've got a minute. What would you like to do, Caroline?
Thank you, Chair Plowden. I'd like to very quickly ask you Melissa's questions, and then, if I may, my questions.
They are.
And I didn't realise I'd also missed the statements.
You have.
My Melissa's statement is incredibly brief.
Do you want to make your statement now?
Melissa's statement.
Okay.
Right.
I'm just going to make this clear that making an exception this time, but normally we don't normally allow people to make statements on behalf of other people. Thank you, Caroline.
I'm sorry. It's just she's been so ill. Right. So I just tried to it's just very condensed. With respect to Melissa's topping statement, the trial must be suspended forthwith due to significantly practical failings. This is especially important due to the hazards posed for emergency vehicles and inhabitant safety. No reason is given for its ongoing illegal existence. Decision makers seem impervious to all common sense and totally deaf to legitimate objections and concerns of the resident. This committee seems blind to the damages doing to people's livelihoods, equity of opportunity, social relations, and in the mixed communities, and also, by the way, to the massive problems caused to people who live elsewhere. The scheme demonstrably fails the PSED. You can quote as many EQIAs as you like if it demonstrably fails. The population is now struggling to live with even huge and new problems on top of those it already had. There is and has been no consultation. This ill-conceived scheme should not continue, and you are and will all be accountable. That's for Melissa.
Okay, do you want to make your statement?
Could I do the questions?
Okay.
Right.
So,
shall we start with Melissa's questions?
So the questions, the answers have been published. Melissa's question is questions number 1 and 2. So they're just appearing on the screen now, the answers. So if you want to ask any follow-up questions, Caroline.
What questions? Melissa's follow-up questions. Can you please tell me more about this new group, the Bristol Disabled People Strategic Transport Advisory Group?
Yeah, I can do that. This is a group that I've set up with the chair of the Bristol Disability Equality Forum, which is Alan Davis, and that's met, I think, now 3 times before each of the committee meetings, and is giving us advice as strategically as how transport can do the best it can for disabled people.
Fine. mentioned all the people on it?
No.
Okay, right.
I'm very happy to, if you want, then we can publish minutes of that.
Thank you. Right. Her second thing, the second supplementary is this report, which you've identified, says that Council resolves to ensure that all projects are co-designed with people affected by it whenever possible. And so when are you going to start co-designing the EBLN with us? I'm speaking as Melissa because I'm not EBLN, as we have constantly suggested and asked for.
Adam, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think we've been clear. We've been through the co-design process. We're now in the trial process. We will be getting the data coming in from the trial, and when that's completed, then we will set out what the process will be when the data is all collected to do the assessment, and then be making a decision on whether the trial goes ahead. But that the co-design process is completed.
Seen the answers, but basically, I think the answer to your question is someone's past employment is kind of irrelevant. It may help them get the job, and we give everyone training in public sector equality duty and doing good equality impact assessments.
Right, do you want my supplementary question? I think it's crucial that you are at least seen to be impartial. Will you agree and commit to not making this mistake again and ensure that the staff member used has not been part of the cycling lobby lot? I think you've got to make it really clear that you are impartial. Will you agree and commit to not making this mistake again, please?
No. This is not a mistake. This person is a professional, they have integrity, they have experience in transport, and their previous employment may have helped them gain employment in this authority. And it's just because you don't like an organisation, Caroline, that does not mean that someone can't do a perfectly professional equalities impact assessment. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to commit to that, no.
Right, question 2. I have no feelings about Sustrans personally. I was going to say people generally do not know about your consultations. The Disability Commission is funded by Bristol City Council, run by Alan Davis, and the people on it are grace and favour invites from him. It is neither independent nor impartial. BDEF has finally asked for views in its very last newsletter, but only for general comments. Will you commit to making consultations widely known and properly publicising them, e.g. local TV news?
I think the answer to that is that we do make every effort to make our consultations public. You can subscribe to the Ask Bristol website, and we can't control the content of the TV news. The next person who's asked a question is David, we've done you. So next is Matt Sanders, and thank you for your patience, Matt. Again, hopefully you've seen the published answers to your questions, so let's move straight on to the supplementary questions, Matt.
Okay. There's a chart has been given as an answer to my first question, which was about the size of signage at the East Bristol Livable Neighbourhood bus gates. There's a chart. And I pointed out to this committee in January, I'd seen some of the advanced direction signs there had been installed and were undersized, smaller than the size specified in the traffic signs manual. So for my question, I asked, but in recent weeks, they've been taken down and replaced with bigger signs. So I applaud the council's decision to look at the traffic signs manual for a change. So I asked for a chart to show what size was originally specified on the drawings and what size has actually been installed. And I asked for the diameters of the 953B blue bus route disc that you get on these signs. So the chart doesn't actually say the diameters of those signs. What it does say is the size of the text. So when it says X height in the 5th column, that's the size of the text. So it hasn't actually answered my question. It hasn't said the size of the blue discs, but I'll explain what the difference is. But anyway,
Can we get to a question, please, Matt?
okay. To explain the chart, what the answer was then, because it isn't here. The size of the blue disc is 4 times the size of the text. So when it says X height 60 millimeters, for instance, that's a 360 millimeter disc. Was originally specified, and then, for instance, the second one down Feeder Road, 30 miles an hour, it went from 60 millimeters to 100 millimeters, nearly twice as big, which means a 600 millimeter disc. So originally they tried to specify 18-inch ones and then went to 2 foot, so they're now much bigger. So
the question is?
Okay, so there's about 20 signs listed, and almost every one is now bigger than it was originally specified. So I'm curious about various things, like when it was decided to make these changes. I know some of the signs were installed, others presumably would have, and then changed. Others presumably would have been if it hadn't been for all the protests. So I'm curious about how many of those 20 signs were actually manufactured at the other size and then remade, and roughly how much money that cost. That's my first supplementary question then.
I guess that's Adam. You're probably going to have to go and find the answer.
Yeah, I don't have that information, but we can take that away.
Roughly, I'm sure you know roughly how many were actually made. Was it all of them, or just the ones that were installed?
I don't know that. Sorry.
I think Adam has a huge remit and delegates an awful lot of responsibility to other people, Matt. So I more than happy if a minute of what you've asked. How many signs were manufactured and how much did that cost that weren't used? Okay.
Why and when the change was made?
How many and how much? Did you have a second follow-up question?
Okay.
And can we please try and get to the question, because we have got a very packed agenda here today, Matt.
Okay. Well, you can see the other questions. One was about the red tarmac, which the council failed to install in the last 8 bus gates. They failed to install before enforcement started. So I was just asked for reassurance that it would be installed this time before enforcement started, and the answer is that yes, we can expect that. Though they only mentioned hard enforcement there, so it'd be interesting to see if it's there in time for the warning letters. I pointed out the bus gate road marking has been painted wrongly, so instead of all being in the lane to which it refers in 2 lines, it's been painted in 1 line across the whole road, so half of it is in the lane for the other opposing traffic. So as you're driving along, a lot of people, the road marking will be obscured by oncoming traffic, which is obviously utterly stupid. And the bus gate road marking should have been painted in 2 lines, as it is in every other bus gate around town, except the ones at Bristol Bridge, where it was done in 1 line originally in 2020, and then changed 2 years later.
So the question is?
Okay, so an associated issue with bus gate signage. It's about the yellow backing boards then. When the 6 bus gates were installed in the city centre in the summer of 2020, their blue bus route signs did not have yellow backing boards, but after excessive numbers of contraventions, the yellow boards were added a year later. Yellow boards are not a legal requirement, but obviously it was acknowledged that they can play a significant role in informing approaching drivers of a traffic restriction. At the East Bristol livable neighbourhood, the published concept art showed no yellow backing boards, but the signs that have been installed do have yellow boards after all, so that's good, isn't it? I congratulate you for that one as well.
It's really nice to hear some positive feedback coming from you, Matt. I really would ask you to, can we get to a question? So if there are other people here that want to ask questions, we're eating into their valuable time.
Okay, not many of them though, is it? As the council clearly believes that yellow backing boards play a valuable role in informing drivers and has put them in bus gates even when they weren't there before. Why have you still not installed yellow backing boards at the city's most disastrous bus gate in Cumberland Road?
I think that's probably one for Sean.
That's somewhat which I will take away to look at to see how much we can look at the data to see how much the yellow backing boards have had an effect on enforcement, and if, as we said with the red surfacing, we've made a commitment to make sure the red surfacing goes in before any hard enforcement happens on the bus gates. If we feel that the yellow backing boards are making the same sort of impact, then that's obviously something as an authority we will consider going forward.
Let's see how you can see the difference.
Well, I think we'd maybe go back and look at the experience of Bristol Bridge and see how quickly that made an effect. I'm going to move on. Have we got Alistair? I'm not sure how to pronounce this surname. Is Alistair here? No. I can't see Dan Aykroyd. Okay, shall we move on then? Annual business report. I'm handing it over to Sam, the clerk of the court, clerk of the committee.
Yes, so this is the annual business report at the start of the municipal year 2025-26. The report outlines the membership of the committee, which has not changed from the previous municipal year. The appointment of the chair and vice chair, which is also unchanged from the previous municipal year. The report notes the terms of reference of the policy committee and notes the meeting dates proposed. So the recommendations are listed on the front page of the report. Thank you, Chair.
I think they're also on your screens for anyone that wants to see them. I think this is no more than let's move on. Noting the recommendations, what I'd also like to say is thank you to all the members that sit on this committee. It's been very hard work. We've had some very long meetings. We've got through a lot of decisions. I'd also like to thank also the officers over the past and the coming year for incredible hard work, really high quality and evolving, increasing quality of paperwork and accessibility of that paperwork. And I look forward to working with you all for the forthcoming year. Shall we move on to the petition debate? So we have had a petition that was signed by over 1,500 signatories. It was Councillor Mark Weston whose petition is called Stop the Roadworks and the Madness, and has been presented to the committee. And you've got up to 5 minutes, Mark. There's no need to speak for the full 5 minutes, but you've got up to 5 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning.
Thank you, Chair. Picture it, if you will, ladies and gentlemen. It was a dark and snowy morning in February 2019, and out through the mist on the top of Park Street, a chubby creature appeared. Not a Yeti, but myself in snow boots, hiking, walking, ladies and gentlemen, from Henbury and Brentry to get to the council house. Never want to do that again. But in the council house, it was just me and the planning officer about to tell me the nightmare descending on Henbury and Brentry. And I sat there in the cash hall with my head in my hands, and you knew it was bad, and for the simple reason that as soon as it became public, every single politician and party in North Bristol condemned the proposals. So the local mayor, the local councillors, all parties said they were rubbish. And then they went away, and then they were revised, and then this new sort of set came forward. And what we've got now is the A418 between Crow Lane and the top of Brentry Hill being dug up, the dual carriageway down to one lane, and all kinds of madness conflicting my ward. Now, Henbury and Brentry is a symbiotic ward, and the dual carriageway splits it. And at the moment, it is causing complete mayhem for local residents. And it's easy to think that, see why they're so cross, because it's £6 million, it's 2 years' worth of roadworks, complete disruption to their lives, to support a bus in for one bus service on a stretch of road where the bus wasn't delayed. The road worked. The bus moved round. It got busy at peak time. Everywhere gets busy at peak time. But imagine it, if you will, a roundabout dual carriageway where things moved freely. A utopian vision. It was never utopia, but what happens now is far from it. And so we have the situation now where we have another 15, 18 months of this relentless roadworks. And it's easy to see why local residents think the council's not listening, because when this was proposed, we've had petitions, letter writing campaigns, meetings, press, debates, and each and every time, we've had 2 general elections, 2 local elections, WEC elections, and in total I found 2 people in favour of it. They're lovely, by the way, but everyone else is completely against it. And it's easy to see why they're ignored, because we are where we are. This is still happening to my ward. And the plans that have come forward now don't include any mitigation for what we knew would happen. If you stuff up a main road, the traffic doesn't evaporate and vanish. Oh no, it flows down the neighbouring roads. And that's exactly what it's done, all over the place. And what we've actually made it worse. You've got 2 lanes of traffic coming from Cribbs Causeway towards Crow Lane. We then stuff up one and we put cones in, but we put the cones in right by Lippincourt Road. So what does the traffic do? It turns down Lippincourt Road at speed, then goes all around all the local roads, past the school, the Scout Hut, at speed, and we didn't think that would happen. And we've done it the other way. 2 lanes coming down. Well, let's put some cones down. What do? They turn straight down Dragonswell Road. We actually sited the cones in such a way. We encouraged rat running onto the residential roads. We didn't put signs up or anything. We're trying to retrofit this now. But this was all obvious, and we said this would happen, and no one paid attention. So it's quite easy to see why my ward thinks that they are being ignored. It's because this is being done to us and not with us. Now, I do appreciate, Chair, when I raise the issue of the traffic calming of Braintree Lane, you got it put back in. So I do thank you for that. But there are a whole multitude of other problems with the scheme as it's being built and the scheme overall. And so when this petition started, which was February, we quickly gathered 2,800 signatures on it. I'm afraid this is the first opportunity we've got to present it, because really we would have presented it somewhat earlier. But we want this madness to stop, because it is absolutely horrific, and the end result of this will be that you will deliberately create congestion on the road in peak times, and then what will happen is the council will say, "Ooh, look at that congestion. Thank God we put in a bus lane. Imagine it without it." Whereas we locals that live there go, "God, yeah, imagine it without it, you know, when it flowed and worked." So I realise this is a probably forlorn hope, but we're going to go down swinging as a community. And we have tried everything else on this, and so this is it. If this is the final punch we can throw, we're going to do it. We don't like it, almost unanimously. This is a ridiculous proposal. It's an expensive proposal, and we would love for it to be stopped. But I also realise the contracts were signed by the last administration, not this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and very good. Well within, 12 seconds to go you had, so very good indeed. And hopefully we can all show that discipline for the rest of this meeting, actually. So I now, as per the full council, I invite the 4 political groups in order of size to respond. You have up to 3 minutes. Don't feel obliged to take the full 3 minutes, and I will give you a 30-second warning. So I know that Rob is going to respond on behalf of the Green Group. So take it away, Rob.
Hello, Mark. So first thing to say, it is really good. I think this is the first time we've had a petition come to transport and connectivity. You are, yeah, literally the guinea pig for this.
It's the first of any committee.
Yes. So it's really good to sort of have that as a feature, I think, of the committee system. There wasn't, I don't think, such a system for petitioning cabinet meetings, at least in terms of the number of signatures you get. So it's really good that we've got this. I'd like to congratulate you for getting that number of signatures. That's a lot, 2,800 Bristol residents. And I presume the 217 other people were sort of nearby South Gloucestershire kind of people, I guess. It does show that you care about getting community support for things, and I think that's very valid and a really important aspect of petitioning for anything. So, here. But the works on A4018 Passage Road are to mitigate the increase in demand from the Cribbs Patchway new neighbourhood, the CPNN. And I think it would be remiss of us not to try and get new residents of this new community into good habits of moving from A to B around Bristol. Indeed, the research shows that moving house is the #1 moment you can affect travel behaviour in individuals. Because obviously when you move to a new area, you don't know it as well. If someone gives you a load of information, which does happen, you know, you have travel advice, people come around and give advice on walking, cycling, bus buses, trains, whatever, what have you, you're much more likely to change your habits immediately. And of course, we've got 7,000 extra households. More than that. Yeah, I've actually written here that's a conservative figure, which is quite funny. But yes, I think we're going to have a gridlock city if we don't act. And I think if at the end of the day, we are providing these things, a protected two-way cycle lane, improved pedestrian crossing, a new pedestrian crossing, 4 bus stop upgrades, peak hour bus lanes installed in both directions. That sounds pretty good to me. And so the content of the petition is not a cause I support, and I think roadworks are a necessary evil to improve transport infrastructure. You're always going to have them. The length of this is particularly not great, and it's regrettable that they will last that long, but I believe it is in Bristol's best interest to have greater bus priority throughout the city centre, the inner city, the inner suburbs and the outer suburbs. It's only by moving to a better balance of modes of transport that we can tackle air pollution, carbon emissions, the health impacts of mass private vehicle use. So I would have hoped that those 2,800 Bristol residents would support those as aims. And I don't think that them signing this petition means that they don't. It just means that they're...
30 seconds, Rob.
Oh, thank you. That they're frustrated. And I do hear that, and it is frustrating when there are all kinds of roadworks going on. But I do think this is something that we should continue to support. While there's only one bus route currently going through there, of course, First Bus, they work on the principle of a bottom line, a very capitalist concept, Mark. And that means that they do want more ability to put routes down here. If we put this bus lane in, they will be much more likely to run another service down there.
So exactly 3 minutes. Kaz, I think you're responding on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Mark, for bringing this petition. Not only thanks to you, but also the petitioners. And I do appreciate the anecdote of you in your snow boots, which will live with me for quite a long time. But let me address the issues raised. Firstly, we've got to note there's a huge amount of development going on to north of this junction. As been mentioned by Rob, thousands of new homes and 50 hectares of employment land. Not to mention the increased number of commuters who live in areas like Newport, where housing costs are lower in Bristol, that try to get along the A418. Now I note that the former Tory MP Charlotte Leslie spent a lot of time campaigning for new train stations in North West Bristol. And would you believe she even had a petition on it? What happened when she was in charge? Nothing. What happened when Tim, what's his name, was Metro Mayor? Nothing. So with a Labour Metro Mayor, we opened 2 new train stations in Bristol, and Helen Godwin has pledged to open Filton North as the first phase of the Henbury Spur and other stations as well. Improved public transport is a way to solve congestion in this city. Doing nothing is not an option. There might be a limited number of buses using this route at the moment, but we need to plan for the future. Those new homes and businesses will need good public transport connectivity, and there will be more bus services needed. And if we want to take cars off the road, then improved public transport, improved wheeling and walking options are the only way we're going to do this. The petition says the scheme is primarily to install a bus lane. Well, I've looked at the scheme. The truth is it also contains cycling infrastructure, improved pedestrian crossings and bus stops, something the petition seems to completely ignore. In fact, 75% of the cost is for the new cycle lane infrastructure. When I was door knocking earlier this year, I heard from a lady who had an autistic child, and she said she didn't feel safe cycling on the roads in Bristol with that child. Women say they don't feel safe cycling on Bristol's roads. I disagree that this scheme is universally unpopular, although I recognise the inconvenience that roadworks cause. Addressing the issue of the single-lane carriageways, now I've made many a journey going southbound on the way home from Cribs. What happens when you exit the Crow Lane roundabout onto Passage Road? I'll tell you what happens. You get some boy racers overtaking you on the outside, exceeding the speed limit. And the northbound approach to the roundabout, in the finished scheme, the 2 lanes on the approach to the roundabout northbound are reinstated for all traffic before the roundabout junction. So yes, there are delays at the moment on the approaches, and as a councillor, I'm sorry there's inconvenience. But it's a short-term pain for long-term gain, like for all road improvements. It says the roadworks will take 2 years. I've clarified what council officers what this really means, and the works can be phased from north to south, from the Crow Lane roundabout area in January-June 25 to the Charlton Road area in June-December 2026, and there are not expected to be any restrictions on the roundabout once this summer is over. And I hope this goes some way to reassuring Councillor Weston and the petitioners. To conclude, I do not agree that this is madness. It's a genuine attempt to address the issue of congestion by making alternatives available.
Thank you, Kaz. Next up is the Lib Dem. So again, your 3 minutes starts now. Nick.
Thank you. A small section of this project is within Westbury and Henleys, which is the ward that I represent, and I have also received complaints from local residents, both by email and at the Westbury Neighbourhood Forum. It was surprisingly the first item that was raised at the meeting 2 weeks ago. I have observed a pattern here over the last year of finding easy bus lanes on existing dual carriageways as quick wins pushed through the CRSTS scheme process. While I have supported the majority of CRSTS bus and cycle projects on this committee, I have voted against a few similar schemes to this one, including the one on Wells Road, almost the mirror image the other side of the city. This was, however, before my time, a decision of the previous administration, which Councillor Self didn't actually point out was both a Labour mayor and a Labour Metro mayor who were able to instigate this project. But there is a chance that were this brought to the committee today, I would vote as I have done on others.
Thank you, Nick. And Graham, did you want to say anything on behalf of the Conservatives?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just keep it brief, but there seems to be clear evidence that the consultations that we seem to be using on these projects aren't working because people are feeling frustrated and disenfranchised with the whole process. That's something which I think needs to be addressed because we need to take people with us on any journey rather than just impose schemes. As Councillor Coombs says, the issues that are in Henbury are also in Stockwood Ward, which I represent, and in sort of the Wells Road scheme in particular, and the impact it's having on residents in the area. And the other point about the mitigation, it needs to go hand in hand rather than just putting the bus lanes first. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's been very rapid. I'm just going to go through each of the parties in turn and see if anyone wanted to make any other quick remarks about that. So Greens? Labour? Oh, sorry, Emma.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're always going to have a bit of a paradox, unfortunately, which is people don't want to give up their cars, and when you ask them why, they say because the buses are rubbish, because they can't get public transport. And the only way we're going to get better public transport is if we build more good bus lanes that we can put those public transport in. And to do that, we create roadworks, which then upsets the drivers. So I do have sympathy with those drivers, but sometimes bigger picture, and with the amount of increase in population coming and housing developments, even the zoo has moved out there now. That's more accessible transport for people who don't drive, get their kids to the zoo. I think we've got to think bigger picture and longer term.
Thanks. Kaz, did you want to just follow up on anything then?
Chair, I just wanted to follow up on the consultation, because it's been mentioned by Graham and Mark. The A4018 scheme has been around for quite a long time, and I live in the Bristol North West. But if you look at the original scheme, it did include some closure of roads and stuff like this in Westbury on Trim. And because of consultation, that was dropped from that part of the scheme. So people do listen to consultations, but it's an important topic of debate in the city, and we need to get that right going forward. But I just want to make that clarification.
Thank you. Nick or Graham, any last remarks? No. Okay. I think from my point of view, this is future-proofing our city. We've got a big population increase and a very big population increase immediately to north of this, and we really do need to think about the fact that just physically it's going to be very difficult to fit everyone in if we can continue our current mode share with all being cars. So the best time to do this would have probably been 10 or 15 years ago. The next best time is now, before we actually get the problems that an extra 7 or maybe even 10 or more thousands homes built immediately to the north of this cause. So anyway, I will be making sure that the kind of key points from this debate are captured. We will produce a formal written response, which I will publish. It says here that I'm hoping to do it within 2 weeks. So, but I'm Well, I'm literally going on holiday for 2 weeks tomorrow, so if you'd be so kind, I think I'll put a deadline of 4 weeks on that, if that's okay, Mark. That closes the debate. Thank you very much, and congratulations for being the first person to trigger a policy committee debate with, and only falling very slightly short of the full council debate. Thank you, Mark. Right. The next thing we are looking at is policy design on cycleway surfacing. The purpose of the report is to seek approval from the Transport and Connectivity Policy Committee to conduct a trial of high-friction surface cycleways at 2 or more of the completed or proposed sites identified. The actual recommendation is that we will decide, the committee will decide the locations, and I'm not very happy to go into a situation where the recommendation is that we're going to make another decision at some future point. So what I'm hoping we're going to do here is actually decide here and now. When I sum this up, I'll be summing it up as a recommendation as to actually where we're going to put this. So that's the way I'd like us to be thinking about this, rather than deferring it and recommend that we make a decision at some point in the future at another committee meeting. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Adam to just take us through this report. I think some of the people in the public gallery are the people that wrote this report, Adam. And I'd just like to say that as a fairly new recruit to the City Council, I thought this was an excellent report, and I thank you very much for the thorough research you've put behind it, which I think is really going to help us make a good decision. So thanks very much for all the hard work you've put in. But I'll give the floor now to Adam just to introduce this report.
Yep, thanks. A quick summary then. So we're asked to look at coloration on cycle lanes, what the options would be. There's been a lot of research done of both British sites, British cities, and also other sites around the world, looking at how paint and coloration is used in different areas to delineate cycle routes. The conclusions we came to is that there is benefit to coloration on cycle routes, but there's lots of different ways to do it. Further analysis was carried out. There was a lot of engagement as well with stakeholders like Westhill and Bristol Walking Alliance. And also with colleagues in highways to look at what's the best way of actually doing this. So in terms of materials, the conclusion after looking at all the different options is that red high friction surfacing is the best option to go with, both from legibility but also in terms of maintenance and the quality of the finish that you get. So our recommendation is to go with red high friction surfacing. The next question then is where to apply it. Obviously, you could apply red surfacing to every bit of cycle route in the city. That would be quite expensive. The view is that what we need to do is to do a trial at some conflict points to understand what benefits the red surfacing brings. So we proposed a number of sites that we could use for a trial. Two of the best ones probably being Old Market Gap and Bristol Bridge, being that they are recently completed sites and are complete, so we could apply the surfacing fairly quickly. We will then have vivacity cameras, which are cameras that monitor people and cycles moving around the space, and will give us an indication of how behaviour changes before and after the application of the red paint. The red paint would be applied in conflict points, so if you consider Baldwin Street, we wouldn't be applying red paint or red HFS, all the way along Baldwin Street. We would be applying it at the conflict points around the Bristol Bridge junction to see how that impacts. So there's a number of sites recommended there. There's the two existing ones I've mentioned, and then there's a number of new schemes coming forward, like Anchor Road, College Green, Union Street, some of which we'll be talking about in today's committee. So we're asking for a steer on which site to use, and basically to approve for us to do the trial, to then come back with the findings of that trial to inform a policy in future once the findings of the trials have been understood. So the recommendation is to approve the trial of red-coloured cycleways at suggested options of high conflict points. I agree it'd be useful to agree the site today so we can get on with it. And then to authorise the Exec Director of Growth and Regeneration consultation with the Chair to agree the preferred option outlined in the report.
So before we, I'd like to people to ask questions for Adam and then make their comments and have a debate afterwards. So David, did you have a question for Adam?
Thank you, Chair. As an example of a high friction surface, would I be correct in thinking that it would be similar to the red high friction surfaces that have been laid down Park Row and up on Magdalen Street recently?
Yeah.
Excellent. They are very frictiony. I've ridden along them and I haven't fallen off. It's good. And I understand the SMA surfaces, such as being installed around Frog Marsh Bridge in Easton, can be quite slippery in frosty conditions. So I think that's a very useful decision to actually make.
Yeah, and they also can potentially be less long-lasting and patchy as well, which is why we think the HFS is the best option to go with.
Thank you. And so members might be aware that I was posing an amendment to put the area around St Augustine's Parade into the mix for a red high friction surface. But I understand that the procurement of fixing that area is happening imminently, and to change that procurement package right now will actually delay any work happening in St Augustine's Parade. And I don't want to do that because it all needs to happen really quickly around that area, and I think it would be a bad thing if this committee was to delay it. But I would like some indication that a red high friction surface could be retrospectively applied around St Augustine's Parade, because it is the one area in Bristol where people do talk about conflict between cyclists and pedestrians, and I want to try and remove it, please.
Yeah, so that bit of cycle lane, the existing stone paving is going to be removed and replaced with black tarmac to provide better delineation. We have a Vivacity camera already up there monitoring the existing situation. That will then monitor what it looks like with the black tarmac in place. HFS can then be applied to the black tarmac following from that. There is some spare funding in the budget for additional works if needed, and obviously there is a contingency as well. We do think it will be useful though to also understand how the black tarmac compared to the non-delineation, if you like, works, so we can get some information to feed into the policy from that as well. But certainly red surfacing could be applied there in future at the conflict points. I think in particular the crossing across Baldwin Street, everyone just crosses all over it. So, delineation there will be really important, I think, to be clear where the cycling crossing is and where the pedestrian crossing is.
As this is a trial, could we not just allow officers to choose the best way of doing the trial and bring the results back, rather than trying to micromanage what particular places they wouldn't do this trial? I think what we need is the clear results from officers, and officers are perfectly competent to make that decision.
I think my question would be, have we got the funds to do both Old Market Gap and Bristol Bridge?
I can take that away and check. I mean, I would certainly recommend Old Market Gap and Bristol Bridge rather than the other schemes, because they're not ready to go yet. We could take that away and give you a recommendation if you want it to just be the officers and the chair. But either of those two, I'll check how much funding is available.
Any other comments? Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, when I first joined Transport, I was surprised that we didn't have a policy for these cycle routes, if I'm honest. And I'm really pleased to see that this is coming forward. What I think we should do, though, is be very particular when we put in the sort of the floating bus stops, that it should be almost standard practice if the trial goes that far and it becomes a permanent thing, that we make sure that those where pedestrians have to cross over to those bus stops, that we make sure that is one of the areas that should always be highlighted. One other point, sorry, Adam, is just I was thinking about it. We're talking about conflict. We're talking here not just cars versus cyclists, I suppose, but also pedestrians versus cyclists, which I think is perhaps more pertinent.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably agree, to be honest. We did a walk around on the Park Row scheme, and I guess the bits that did feel most confusing were where you had the cycle crossing adjacent, like parallel to the pedestrian crossing. And that's where I think that there would certainly be benefit of highlighting the different area. The bus stops, we have been developing our designs for the bus stop bypasses, putting in guard railing to help visually impaired pedestrians guide their routes properly. We've got the black and white zebras there as well to really highlight where the crossings are. But I think those are the sort of places where there is conflict, actually mainly between pedestrians and cyclists seem to be the most important points. But also when you're going across the road, that highlights it for the cars as well.
I'll just add a few remarks. I looked at this. We looked at the colour very carefully. It's really clear to me that the longest lasting and most economic solution is going to be red high friction surfacing. I do want it noted in the minutes, if possible, that we have had some concerns from the equalities groups that particularly visually impaired people, red may not be the best colour. But I think in the interests of longevity, any colour that's going to be long-lasting is probably best of all. When we went on a walk of Park Row, my personal view was changed. I wanted a lot more red continuously along cycle lanes, but having looked at Park Row, I think it's been done really, really well. It's been used in a way that it really clarifies things at those points where things aren't very clear, rather than too ubiquitously. So my mind was actually changed by actually seeing that in real life. My preference would be that we do the Old Market Gap and the Bristol Bridge, and that we do take that incremental approach of parade. So my recommendation is going to be that we do it subject to funding. We delegate to officers in consultation with the chair, which is me, to do subject to funding both Old Market Gap and Bristol Bridge, and take an incremental approach to St Augustine's Parade so that we can learn the most we can. And we layer it up using the Vivacity cameras. Is that something that people would be willing to approve? You're seconding that, so I'll actually move that as a motion. That's seconded by David. Would anyone like to speak to that? Shall we take a vote? So in favour of both to the two sites plus incremental approach to St Augustine's Parade, delegated to officers. All in favour? That's unanimous. Okay, great. We're making great progress. Oops, turn over the page in the right direction this time. So, next up is the City Centre Transport Corridor Bond Street full business case submission, and this is to seek approval for a submission of a full business case to the West of England Combined Authority for CRSTS funding, subject to approval, to accept and invest the funding to deliver the City Transport Corridor Bond Street improvement. This is a key decision report because it's a decision involving over £500,000 and affecting 2 or more wards. Adam, would you like to introduce and outline the report?
Yeah, and I will take a bit of time with this one to explain a few things and also to highlight this is the first report today out of 3, which will be looking to deliver the red route that was set out back in the city centre framework from 2018 and has since been one of the kind of fundamental elements of our CRSTS programme. So the red route is a rapid transit route extending from the M32 through to Long Ashton Park and Ride. The intention being that it is almost fully segregated from traffic wherever possible. So this element of the scheme is connecting the inbound bus lane on the M32 through to the inbound bus lanes going past Cabot Circus. So it seeks to fill the gap that is there at the moment, and then it provides bus lanes outbound from I've got the name, James Barton Roundabout to the M32, and also some improved cycle routes through back roads to the north of Bond Street. So that's the kind of wider picture. This scheme is that element, and as such, in terms of the modelling, we have to model that element alone. So the modelling that is presented in the report is modelling this element on its own, which tends to produce a worse forecast maybe than you would get from modelling the full scheme. A quick word on different types of modelling, because it does get complicated. This is being done under the low risk transport scheme approach that WECA have agreed, or WECA Grant Assurance have agreed. That means that there is a lesser requirement for what we have to demonstrate in the business case. So to some extent, the modelling is less comprehensive than it would be for a larger scheme. That's to take a proportionate approach to the funding and the business case work that is required for different schemes. So the modelling that was done on this scheme, there was a high-level Wurtham run, which is the regional model, done to assess how traffic would move around. And then there was a detailed model of the local junction done, and that detailed model was used to calculate the traffic delay. What that modelling didn't do was allow for any mode shifting between the different modes. We were simply seeking to understand if the bus lane improvements delivered significant benefits to buses. So as a result of that, there is a significant disbenefit due to the delays to traffic that reallocating road space causes. Now, reallocation of road space is something that is in line with our local policies, the Bristol Transport Strategy, our regional policies, the Joint Local Transport Plan, and national policies in terms of Bus Back Better. All of those set out that you should be reallocating road space where feasible from traffic to buses to promote sustainable transport modes. So that's what the scheme is doing. The business case process does tend to give undue weight to disbenefits to cars. So as we've done the modelling, which is appraised over a 60-year period, what it's concluded is that there is £68 million of disbenefits in total. So there are positive benefits for buses, walking and cycling, and then there are negative benefits, or disbenefits if you like, for cars. If you exclude the disbenefits of cars, we get a BCR of 2.15. If you don't, then you have a negative BCR. A negative BCR doesn't really make any sense because the ratio is about comparing the amount of something to the amount it costs. So where you have a negative BCR of, say, 10 and your scheme costs £1 million, you'll get a negative BCR of minus 10. Where the disbenefits are still minus £10 million, but your scheme actually costs £10 million, so the same scheme but just costing more, your negative BCR is minus 1. So a negative BCR doesn't make a lot of sense. When you get a negative BCR, you just tend to highlight that that's what it is. So following on from that, the total disbenefit at £68 million is around £1 million a year over that 60-year appraisal period. There are around 70,000 trips going through the junction, so that £1 million per year divided by the number of trips over a year is about 4 pence per trip on average. However, there will be significantly higher costs to the routes that are more congested. What the modelling initially showed was that was the M32 in the evening peak, the inbound M32 in the evening peak, and outbound on Bond Street in the morning peak. We have since had some additional modelling carried out, which isn't in the papers. I have emailed committee about that over the last couple of days. So that modelling was commissioned to look at what the impacts of all of the city centre schemes would be, and also to enable mode switching. So the current modelling that is in the paper doesn't enable mode switching, so it presents a worst case situation because it's not assuming that anyone will get out of a car due to congestion and use a bus or walk or cycle, etc. So the revised modelling that has just been received yesterday shows that a significant number of people do switch modes as part of the 5 schemes that make up the city centre strategic corridor. And that mode switching reduces the congestion to the point where the delays on the M32 in the evening are vastly reduced, and it's basically at capacity rather than being over capacity. And the only remaining delay, in essence, is Bond Street South, so coming up Temple Way, which is delayed by about 2.5 minutes. So overall, therefore, the scheme is doing what it sets out to do, which is to encourage people to use public transport. The key element of it is providing that seamless trip on the routes that come down the M32 and go through the city. So the long-term aim is for the red route, the rapid transit route, but also we have metrobus routes, we have other bus routes, we have coach routes, etc., that use that route currently, which will all now benefit from that bus lane connectivity in both directions. So that was quite a lot, obviously, to put across. It is quite complicated getting into the modelling side of it. We have tried to set out in the paper the point about the modelling and why we've phrased it how we have, and that the current modelling presents it as a worst case scenario. We don't believe it will be that scenario. We will get some additional BCR data towards the end of the month as well. But as it stands, the scheme meets all of our policy objectives, as I say, on a local level, regional level and the national level. And with the revised modelling coming in, it will demonstrate that the impacts to private cars are quite limited. So we have some concerns still from, particularly from highways and traffic, that this is reliant on mode switching. So when a scheme goes in, it may take time for people to change modes. It may take time for people to decide, actually, I prefer to use the bus, I prefer to walk and cycle. So there is potential for congestion when a scheme like this goes in. However, long term, what the modelling suggests is that mode switching takes place, and that rebalances the congestion on the routes and enhances public transport on the walking and cycling options. So I will leave it there and allow for questions.
Questions, Tim.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think we do support this scheme overall, and I think it's really important what you've said about the fact that this scheme and other schemes that are all coming forward at the moment are all, you need to see them all as one, and that's really important. And one of the things I'm a bit surprised at is that there are maps for the Redcliffe scheme that show the red route and the blue route and the circular plans. You know, I think that's really important in understanding this scheme, but they're not in the papers for this scheme. So I think that's something maybe we've missed is kind of to keep explaining what the rationale is behind this whole route through the city. And I don't agree with Councillor Coombs's amendment about getting rid of the bus game. Well, we've had it circulated, haven't we? Okay. Well, okay.
Let's, if Councillor Coombs does or doesn't not move,
he may not move it. But the point I'm making really is about the fact that one bus carrying 50 passengers really should be given priority in my opinion over 25 cars queuing up. So I don't really see a problem with stopping the traffic in order to allow a bus to pass by, and if that bus is not there, then you wouldn't be stopping the traffic. So
just to add to that, Tim, one of my key questions was, will the traffic delays actually cause queues further back than bus lanes, or actually start locking up the junctions, because then you actually start disbenefiting buses as well. And I think Adam's been pretty clear that unless there's an extraordinary event like a crash on the M32 or something like that, that shouldn't happen. So we won't get that kind of effect where the congestion actually affects the smooth running of the buses. So that's something that I've been quite diligently checking out as well.
Okay, but we do have a concern. We have a major concern really about all these works at the moment, and that's the impact that they're all going to have on the city because of the tight timescales that have got to be delivered in. And it's really something that's worrying us about the city seizing up in the next year or so, because there is so much work. You know, we've had 3 here, we've had the others that have come in the previous meeting, and that's something that really is concerning us at the moment. And one of the things I was wondering is whether we could have a report come maybe to the next committee to set out how we're intending to sequence and deal with all these roadworks, so that we can see that sufficient, work is going into making sure that we don't end up with it. And Sean, you're looking at me, but I know this is your responsibility, absolutely, that we don't end up with a city that seizes up and people literally can't get to where they need, get around the city, because we've got 4 different schemes happening at the same time that that basically cause gridlock. So I don't know, Ed, if that's something that we could perhaps have a look at.
Yeah, we can certainly bring something to committee. That this is something that's being recognised at a regional level as well. So we were in discussions with the combined authority, and they are also looking at how we mitigate the impacts of schemes. Some schemes are much easier to do than others when you have the road space to do them. And some will be much more impactful. So, I think something like Bedminster Bridges will be quite impactful. This scheme actually, if the long-term plan is we're taking a lane out, actually we can take a lane out to build the curb line, so it's possibly less impacting, but we do need to ensure they're all coordinated. We won't have the full detail until we have the tenders and understand how the contractors plan to build all of the schemes. But as part of that process, we will be looking to coordinate with the network management team as well, how all the works happen so that we minimise the impacts, and also looking at how we can secure additional funding for things like park and ride services to mitigate impacts during the works as well.
I'm really glad to see some paperwork recently being presented to directors at WECA, which talks about how we might actually introduce traffic light priority. So instead of just closing the bus lane and expecting the bus to join the rest of the traffic during roadworks, we're actually pushing the bus to the front of the queue. We're also looking at additional, potentially some funds for additional buses, I think, for the fleet first. That's something that's a bit difficult to get past some of the accountants at WECA, but we're certainly trying it. And also doing some promotions, because if we're trying to get people on the buses, then let's make sure that the buses are given priority through the bus work, so that actually we're building in the benefits realisation through the actual work we do, as well as after the scheme. And that's been quite a challenge that I've been carrying to WECA officers in particular, to look at how we can put some funding into that. And they're accepting that challenge. So it's about coordinating all the different roadworks in Bristol, but actually the same thing's happening in both Bath and South Gloucestershire at the same time. So thinking about how we manage roadworks in a slightly different way that actually enhances the buses and builds in the benefits we want to see.
Yeah, and I think this committee, probably all agree that we would really like some reassurance that all that work, is being done, and that we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that we can deliver this in the best way possible. The other thing,
actually, if I could say, it's a risk I keep talking about, but it's being managed so proactively at the moment. It's not appearing on the corporate risk register. It's hovering just below it.
Yeah, and it won't until things go wrong. Yeah. But the other thing that's related to all this is it's all designed to deliver this red route, and I think we probably all agree that's a really good thing. But what the worst thing that could happen is that we deliver all the infrastructure, and then the lanes sit empty, and we don't deliver the red mass transit route until 10 years later or whatever. So my question on that would really be, who is it, and how do we make sure that once all this infrastructure is in place, that we actually, and I appreciate it's not necessarily our transport team, but how do we make sure that we work to get that route delivered? I'm not even sure that the new Metro Mayor is aware that that's what that route is our plan. She may well be, but we need to, change all these changes of personality from 2018 when this plan was drawn up. So many people have sort of come and gone that we need to make sure that vision is still aware by the people who are now in charge, and they deliver on it.
I'm going to second guess Adam's answer, but I think it's probably the F word, isn't it, which is franchising. Is probably one of the key things we need to do to make sure that we're bringing it into our control and we're actually sweating these assets as much as we can. But I suspect that First Bus are very supportive of this sort of work because it's good for their bottom line and they can run a better bus service as a result. But sorry, I don't want to steal your thunder, Adam.
No, I think it's a valid point. I'd point out that the red route, other than the M32, will then be fully complete after we've completed these schemes. So the infrastructure will be fully complete, and obviously there is a project in development on the M32 long term to get bus lanes extended up and down the M32. It might take a bit longer. The initial expectation is that the M2 will fill the red route and run more often, more regularly, to start giving that level of frequency that we're looking for. But I think it's a good point about the vision as well, that we need to restate that and to make it clear to combined authority what our long-term vision is, because a lot of this work is delivering what we set out for a long time, which was in line with the WECA bus strategy about more interchange in the city centre, better routes through the city centre. So we're certainly going to take that way to kind of refresh that vision and then restate it so that it is clear for everyone what we're aiming to achieve with these schemes.
Is it right, the M2, we still have a level of control over the frequency and so on? So we can
Yeah,
actually
and
dictate that.
we've got additional frequencies recently through the Section 106 money that we put in. The benefit of this is that we'll get additional frequencies on top of what we've got already. So.
Thanks, Chair. Just something that Councillor Rippington said led me to this question. I guess two questions. Firstly, what do we call the bus filter thing on Newfoundland lanes, roads, as we're all using the same term? And secondly, he said only buses will be able to trigger it, but it's a bus lane open to taxis and motorcycles as well. So will all users of that lane trigger it, or is there a special bus transponder thing to stop it from being the lights just changing when a taxi pulls up?
So the bus lane and gate will be usable by all vehicles that use bus lanes. The design, I would go back and check, but I think it's basically the traffic gets stopped and the bus lane is on a giveaway. So they come through when the lights are on red and they go straight through into the space. But they're able to go through fairly easily. So it is key how that works, and we have done a lot of work on bus gates previously because they don't always work. They need to be designed well to work effectively. If you put them in the wrong place, buses stop using them and then they lose their effectiveness. The point of it is to get them across into the middle lane, and obviously we'll make sure that is designed correctly so that it triggers at the appropriate time. So you can have transponders at buses that can trigger bus priority measures. That sometimes works better than other times, and that wouldn't be triggered by taxis. There are ways of doing that and making that work.
So just to confirm, what are we calling it, and is the version that we've assessed going to be triggered by a taxi?
So it's a bus gate. It won't be triggered by a taxi, but it'll be usable by a taxi.
Are we still on questions? Yeah, I just want to. It's just a quick question. So the new cycling arrangements, obviously, it's an effort to push people onto quieter streets, which obviously is a good idea. But the actual shared use path that currently goes along that whole stretch, all the way up to Junction 3, that's not going to be removed, is it? So they've still got that as an option as well. Because I'll be honest with you, in terms of my own behaviour, I'm just going to carry on using that main road. I just think it's a slightly strange one. It feels like it's a slightly strange one to connect to this, but I see it's probably a positive. But I'm just saying, I think it could be too much of a good thing in a way. But no.
So yeah, at the James Barton end, part of that shared route becomes segregated between James Barton and York Street. From there, the rest of it remains as is. And also, obviously, you'll have a bus lane that cyclists could utilise if they chose to as well. I think that the challenge with having full segregation all the way along there is in terms of space and the carriageway. So, if development were ever to come forward on the south side of the road, there may be options there for providing more segregated facilities on the south side.
Any questions? No. So I'm going to move that we approve submission of the Bond Street full business case for approval at WECA and all the usual kind of delegations. Would anyone like to second that? Was that you seconding it, Nick? I'll take it. I'll see if there's a seconder, and then seconded by Rob, and then so Nick, you would like to move your amendment.
Yes, thank you. So I've prepared this over a few days and shared it with colleagues on the committee. I've no issue with the bus lanes on Bond Street. I think that's a clear benefit, as is the segregated cycle path. So I'm really just focusing on this the proposed bus gate on Newfoundland Way inbound from the M32. So the proposal is to put in an extra set of traffic lights and to extend the bus lane into Newfoundland Way, then Newfoundland Circus, I think it is, so that it matches up. So this is specifically what I'm talking about, and I would like that element removed from this scheme. The reason for that is because the figure 1.9 in the business case, which is a map of bus delays, shows no bus delays in this location. So the issue that we're trying to solve, a bus moving lanes from the right-hand lane to the centre lane, there's no evidence in the papers that we are presented that that causes a delay to the bus. Buses move lanes on the motorway all the way down especially to get into the bus lane, for example. Changing lanes is a thing that a bus can do, and there is no evidence that it causes a delay in the papers presented to us. However, adding those lights does result in a delay to other vehicles on that road. So the delay at the PM peak was 5 minutes in the original modelling presented. In the new modelling presented yesterday, the delay was 4 minutes. It also causes pollution, and this is within an air quality management area. And so the delays plus the pollution has been modelled as a cost of £68 million to the general public, our residents. There was a paper presented yesterday, not published. I'm not sure the status of unpublished papers in terms of our discussions, but that shows that the flows between the do something and the do something with 5 scenarios are similar in that location. There was a way of reducing the delay by changing the pattern of the traffic lights and pushing that delay onto Bond Street northbound. It's still a delay which would be affecting our residents driving through the city. And I know that we want mode share, we want mode shift, we want to change people from driving in cars to going onto buses. But this is the approach to the strategic road network. Our traffic policy is to channel vehicles into a specific route, and this is that route. We don't even have a park and ride on this branch from the city. If we had a park and ride on the M32, then there would be an opportunity for mode share. Without that, it is all cost to local people, thousands of them, waiting in traffic for 5 minutes every single day on their commute, polluting our AQMA with no demonstrated benefit to buses.
Thank you, Nick. Would anyone like to second that amendment? Graham? Okay. Would anyone like to ask any questions either of Nick or of Adam about what has been said? Emma and then Tim?
Well, yeah, I'd like to hear officer response to that, as they haven't had a chance prior to this.
So the bus gate isn't what causes delay, it's transferring one lane to a bus lane that causes a delay. The revised modelling shows that on the M32 or the Newfoundland Road approach, it doesn't actually cause delay due to the mode switching. That's the revised modelling. In the original modelling, it did show that because that didn't enable people to switch modes, which the wider scheme modelling has demonstrated can now happen. The revised modelling that we received yesterday does show some delay to traffic on Bond Street South, or Temple Way if you like. That's around 2 minutes in one peak, and in the other peak there is little delay. So I think what it's showing is that, you know, traffic reaches a certain level. We've taken some capacity away, people are switching modes, and then that delay is being reduced. I appreciate that the modelling we've just completed hasn't been provided in the committee reports, and I do apologise for that. I'm just trying to give you the fullest picture that I have at the moment.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just asking for clarification. So I know we were talking about this route potentially in future could turn into a rapid transit route, whatever that might mean, like more buses, but maybe other modes as well. So I can see the problem that you're trying to solve with this amendment, Nick, but I'm just wondering, like, for the future, would it be easier to keep a bus gate there so that then keeps it for that one mode rather than
so
future-proofing?
So the purpose of the bus lane and the bus gate is to provide full segregation for the route. There is some delay through that section in the current modelling, but also whenever you get an incident, the buses are stuck getting from the bus lane to the next section of bus lane. So, you know, if we're really to make bus a valid option for people, and, you know, whether a mass transit there ends up as a bus or a tram, either way it needs to be fully segregated from traffic, otherwise you get stuck, and that's when they become unreliable, and therefore people don't want to use them. So it is about providing that full segregation.
Yes. So I just clarify, this amendment, would that hinder that?
Yeah, so that would mean that gap would still be there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, we've heard about mode shift being really important, but we've also heard about the M32 park and ride. So I just wondered if somebody could just remind me the status of the M32 Park and Ride as a potential project.
Yeah, so the Combined Authority are leading that. They're developing an outline business case at the moment. I think it's due to come later in the summer or possibly towards the end of the summer to set out what the latest position is on M32 Park and Ride, and associated with that would be bus lanes on the M32 as well.
I think it's also worth saying, Kaz, that I've been briefed on this. South Gloucester has been briefed on this, and we've now asked for a joint briefing so that we can maybe hear the full debate and the full concerns of both authorities in one go and get some political leadership into this whole debate. So that's something that I was actually discussing with the Executive Director this morning, is that was something that was promised to us as soon as the Metro Mayor election had finished, and I'm following up on that. So it's certainly something that we're trying to keep some momentum behind to make sure that we can get that full benefit. Rob?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the sort of stats that's in the papers. About 28% of users of Bond Street are bus users, but they're using just 3% of vehicles. So I think the comments that Nick's made about this is strategic sort of corridor. Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? Is that we need the strategic corridor to be used by more buses. And if we sort of, and potentially, you know, the fundamental part of mass transit, if we get to that point, anything that stands in that way and sort of doesn't move us towards that, I think is problematic. I think you have to have that wide-reaching sort of long-term vision for it. I think it's you know, the modelling for this in terms of the queue length is sort of within the boundaries of what I think is acceptable. We know that if you reallocate road space away from cars for a short period afterwards, traffic increases in other ways, in this case in terms of queue lengths, but we can't model travel behaviour change in quite the same way, I don't think, modal shift. So the more we make it easier for buses to travel down the M32, use all of those roads coming into the centre of Bristol, the more you're going to see change in behaviour. And I think if we're all on team bus and longer term team mass transit, we need to make changes now. Otherwise, we won't be able to get to where we need to be.
Would anyone else like to sort of comment on Nick? And if anyone else would like to comment on or make their feelings known about Nick's amendment, then do put up your hand on Nick speaker. Yeah. So Nick.
Sorry, I just wanted to emphasise figure 1.9. Peak bus delay per vehicle, it's page 13 of the business case, shows that there is no bus delay in this location. No one has argued against this with me. No one's provided any contrary evidence that there is a need for a bus gate in this location. I haven't heard anything in this debate. There is nothing in the paper. There is no evidence that this is required at all.
Okay, I might clarify then. Basically, there isn't a problem now, but we're trying to solve a problem for the future by creating an unbroken route, so that could turn into mass transit in the future. Where you're looking at the problem that's here now, we're trying to think about long term. Does that make sense? Cool.
I'm going to ask people. I'm going to suggest we move to a vote now. So, all in favour of the amendment? That's Nick and Graham. All those against? That's Tim, Don, Kaz, David, Emma, Rob and Ed. So now we move on to the recommendations in the report. Would anyone like to speak any further about the recommendations in the report? Kaz.
Yeah, just one point on that. There's lots of really good things on this whole paper here today with improving these bus routes, but I am concerned about the amount of roadworks and the scheduling of those. We need to take the public with us on this. Yeah, we hear Councillor Weston using words like madness. He's obviously gone now, but it is a concern to the public about the amount of roadworks that's going on, and I just want to make that particular point.
I completely agree with you. It's something that I think the single biggest risk in the next couple of years is the extent of the roadworks and the duration of them, because we're having to do everything everywhere all at once, to coin a phrase, and we really need to get on top of this. I have seen the kind of Gantt chart of Gantt charts that the officers are putting together, and it does highlight the really sensitive areas where we will see some places it can get on and won't have a massive impact, other areas it will, and they're really looking to make sure that they either sequence those together or very much apart, depending on the nature of that sensitivity. Rob?
I'm worried about sequencing too, but I was going to make this point right on the last item of the night, but the CRSTS deadline is incredibly challenging, and that could be moved. You know, it could be moved by the UK government, it could be moved later. The officers, you know, are doing the right thing. They're trying to get as much as we possibly can out of that pot of money and trying to get it done in time. And so if that's a concern for members in this committee, there is a legitimate way for them to raise that, which is to write to people in the Department for Transport and talk about how challenging this is, because it is.
We've actually had the MP for this area, Carla Denyer, ask a number of questions about this and get some rather vague answers, but they haven't ruled it out yet. I'm going, unless anyone else has anything to say, I'm going to move to a vote. So we're going back to the original recommendations in the report. Can I have a show of hands for the recommendations? So that's 4. Abstaining? That's all the Labour and Graham. And against? Nick. So that's 4 for, 4 abstentions and 1 against. Let's move on. I propose we do one more agenda item and then have a break. Is that okay by everyone? And thank you, Graham. And it's good to see your resilience is growing all the time. So can we move on to Redcliffe Roundabout and Redcliffe Way? So this is to seek approval to submit a full business case for a Redcliffe Roundabout to WECA and accept the money and invest it. It's a key decision report because it involves a decision over £500,000, and Adam again is going to introduce, he's working hard tonight to introduce and outline this report.
Yeah, it's going to be a long one. So this is the second of 3 key city centre projects that are delivering the red route that I discussed in the last paper. So this is focused around Redcliffe Roundabout and Redcliffe Way. The key changes that it's delivering are a series of bus priority and walking and cycling improvements around that area. So the key elements is completing the anti-clockwise loop. So we have an anti-clockwise bus loop that goes around the city. When you get to Redcliffe Roundabout, it disappears and then reappears after the roundabout, and is a key point of delay for buses, both doing the anti-clockwise loop and also heading south down Redcliffe Hill towards South Bristol. So that gets completed. We also close Redcliffe Street with a bus gate to make that bus only, which facilitates the red route, and traffic is relocated to Fippin Street and St Thomas Street, which has a new junction allowing traffic to turn right out, so that replaces Redcliffe Street. And then we have segregated walking and cycling facilities being provided along Redcliffe Way and around the roundabout. So that takes cyclists off of the Brunel Mile, which currently doesn't work particularly well as a shared use route, and also connects to a number of other segregated cycle routes across Redcliffe Way, around Temple Meads and to the south as well, and will obviously link into the Bedminster Bridges scheme when completed. So there's a significant upgrade to sustainable transport options through the area, helps to deal with some of these existing issues around the crossing as well by splitting some of those movements apart. The scheme itself, we're looking for FBC approval, and the BCR is around 2.25, which represents high value for money. This has also been done with low risk transport scheme approval process. So again, a slightly lower form of modelling, which tends to underestimate the benefits. There are some additional works associated with the scheme in terms of Section 278, which forms match funding for the wider programme. So that's some of the walking, cycling and public realm enhancements happening around Redcliffe from developer schemes. So that's a scheme. It's the kind of the fourth bit, I suppose, of the route, the Bedminster Bridges being the bottom bit, and then we'll talk about Union Street later, which completes the route. The recommendations are to approve the submission of the FBC for WECA committee, and to authorise the exec director to award the necessary contracts and invoke any subsequent extensions or variations in those contracts.
to ask any questions. David, then Tim, and then Rob.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Adam, for your report. Redcliffe Roundabout, as I understand, is a huge collection of utilities that live underneath it, and that's why the actual size of the roundabout is there, and it's quite big. According to the designs, we've almost got a Dutch-style cycling roundabout here. A Dutch-style roundabout would have much closer, the cycle lanes would actually match the circumference of the roundabout much more closely than what we've got here. Was there any thought to making it a proper Dutch-style roundabout?
I mean, we went through a lot of different design processes. A Dutch-style roundabout tends to be one-way rather than two-way, so we've provided two-way sections. And it also tends to be more like zebra crossing type rather than signal crossings. The signal crossings we feel are quite an important part of the scheme because it will enable us to better control the traffic flows around the roundabout. So currently, because it's uncontrolled, the queue from Temple Way or Temple Gate can come all the way around and lock up round the roundabout. So we want to be able to control the traffic flows getting into that space so that it doesn't then block the red route, doesn't block the buses coming off Redcliffe Bridge to be able to turn right to go south into Bristol. We've been through all sorts of designs. I mean, I first started looking at this area about 15 years ago, I think. So it's been a while to get to this point. And you're right, there is a lot of utilities. There have been discussions about converting it into a junction. It'd be incredibly expensive and incredibly challenging to do, which is why we've come to this scheme, which kind of amends what we've got and tries to provide all of that cycling provision around the roundabout.
And are you planning to map the utilities that are underneath the roundabout while you're making these modifications, or is that an impossible task?
We'll be getting C3s and C4s to understand where all the utilities are and then to move whichever ones we need to move. We're trying to move as few curb lines as possible to stop having to redo drainage and move utilities and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to get a bit more clarity on this circular route that this will be enabling. So am I right in thinking it will be one direction only, because we're not doing works to enable it in the other direction, are we? Have we done any modelling on how long it will take to complete a circuit? Because I'm just thinking with any circular route that only goes in one direction, if you want to get from point here to point there, you have to go all the way around there. It can take a long time. But I was wondering how long it's predicted a circle would take.
Yeah, so it's one direction because it's a lot easier to go left than it is to go right, and some of those right turns aren't possible. Although we will, by the end of this programme, almost have full bus priority all the way round, going right, if you like, or going clockwise. So we haven't done full tests. I have sat in a car with a couple of colleagues and driven around, and I think we got to an estimate of kind of 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how often you get stopped. So the yellow route, which I think Councillor Plowden made the point about franchising earlier, probably does require that wider contracting of bus services, because a route like that is not going to make a lot of money because it's going to be used by people with passes and such like, and you want it to be something that's just part of your network that people just jump on and off. And to actually get that working, I think it needs to be contracted as part of a wider network. So this scheme enables that route to happen. But again, it's part of the vision that we need to kind of restate and resell to the combined authority to say this will provide a lot of benefit. Typically routes like that, they don't operate very well commercially. So as a part of a franchise network, it has a lot of benefit. As a standalone commercial service, it's less obvious.
And I'm just wondering then, given how long it, franchising could theoretically take, whether there's any thought to a sort of way of trialling that once the works are all done, some way of using CAS money to trial the service or something and see how much use it gets, that kind of thing. Because again, it's really a question of showing people that once you've done the work, that you've done it for a reason. And if it waits 5 years empty before franchising comes along, people will be rightly upset.
Yeah, I mean that could be done. I mean, you know, metrobus is specifically contracted, and the pluses and minuses across the different routes are supposed to offset each other. So we could certainly look at that approach. It's something we'll be discussing with the combined authority as we progress the scheme and look at the services that are going to operate.
Might get into some trouble with competition, or if First Bus felt that that was competing with some of their commercial services, so we'd have to look at that very carefully, which is why kind of franchising is the preferred option, because of the sort of vagaries of competition law. So I've got Rob, then David, then Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a comment on one aspect of this and then a question. The comment is the proposed bus loop. It's quite exciting, I think, to me. I remember going to Leeds a long time ago. And they had I don't know whether they still do, I haven't been there for a while, but used to have a loop bus that went all the way around the city centre, which was really helpful. Free bus, in fact. I don't know how they managed to fund that, but just to say that I think that if this enables that, that's helpful. And the question is around Chesterton Square, which I think was labelled on one map as Charlotte Square, which might have been autocorrect, the curse. But this has been changed, hasn't it, from the initial scheme proposal, the draft proposal, I suppose, and then in light of the consultation not to be closed. Can you just go into why that decision was made? Or have I got that wrong? I might have got it wrong.
Which bit do you mean by Chatterton Square?
Sorry, this might be the nth degree of detail. It's the area just sort of further towards Temple Meads Way, which has... It's difficult to describe without literally.
Oh, okay.
On the map.
Yeah, so I know what you mean. Yeah, so that will remain open.
Yeah. Originally, though, it was proposed that that would be closed. And what was was it just feedback from businesses or feedback?
It's from engagement with the Temple Quarter team about enabling an access route that was quite important. So there was no significant disbenefits from leaving it open. So yeah, we decided to take that forward as leaving it open rather than closing it.
All right, so all I was curious about. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to make a similar point to Rob that Manchester has a free orbital bus running around its city centre, and I believe it's electric. Well, the last time I was there, and it was full.
Thanks. My question is about Redcliffe Street, which is currently crossed by a zebra crossing. Is the proposal here to reduce traffic on Redcliffe Street to just buses, but change that zebra crossing to a push-button crossing for pedestrians and cyclists?
Yeah, so it will be, the traffic will move across to St Thomas Street and Fippin Street, so it'll be buses only, and that will be a signal-controlled crossing.
If there is sufficiently low traffic for a zebra crossing to work now, and traffic's getting even lower, what's the need to move to push-button crossing? That would slow down non-motorised users.
So the zebra crossing is one of the problems at the moment, particularly because you have cyclists and pedestrians in the same space, so it makes it very difficult for cars to get through and you get quite a lot of frustration. So part of the scheme relocates or moves the cycle and pedestrian conflict points a bit. We have had a lot of debate about what that crossing should be. Should it be an uncontrolled crossing? Should it be a zebra crossing? Should it be a signal crossing? I think the conclusion was, in essence, that because the buses are going to be quite infrequent, we want that signal control to give people a clear signal. I think you could look at it either way. There will be a road safety audit that will set out the rationale behind that decision. It's been discussed in a fair bit of detail, and the conclusion is a signal crossing. Just to try and, it's quite a difficult one, because when you don't have any traffic on a road, to get pedestrians to think there is going to be traffic on it can be difficult, and it's felt that putting signals there is the best way to make pedestrians think there could be a bus coming, I need to make sure I look properly. Yeah.
I like the idea of it not necessarily being button controlled, but more of on a phase thing where it recognises that there's a bus. But that's, I guess, a detailed design matter, and maybe you could take that away, Adam, for just consideration. I think we've probably exhausted the questions. Would anyone like to make any comments before I move this? Nick.
So Adam says he was looking at this 15 years ago, and coincidentally so was I. When I was doing my Masters in Town Planning, the Urban Design module looked at this site So dozens of us that year, and I'm sure hundreds over the years, have seen Redcliffe Way as an opportunity to reclaim road space and put something productive there. And I'm a little bit middle of the road, so I came up with mixed-use urban blocks, a little bit of a park, and restore historic street patterns. But so it's a little bit sad to see that opportunity hasn't been used here, that the highway boundary is exactly the same. And while we're capitalising on much reduced vehicle traffic, we're not reducing the amount of tarmac here. Overall, there is a public benefit to this scheme, so it's supportable, but it would have been nice to have taken a wider civic, economic and development benefit for a site right in the middle of Bristol's economic zone to not be covered in tarmac. So I hope we can think more roundly about these opportunities in future.
That's certainly something that the Civic Society and St Mary Redcliffe Church have made a very similar point, Nick, and it's something that we've thought about carefully and have decided that the buses probably do provide a very strong civic and public benefit. I'm going to move this now, I'm going to move the recommendations that we approve the submission of the full business case to WECA with all the usual delegations. Would anyone like to second that? Kaz, thank you. So all those in favour, please raise your hands now. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. I'm sorry? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Nick. And you have, I think you make a point well made that we are sacrificing some civic benefits for other civic benefits. I'm going to propose that we have a 10-minute break now. We've been working hard already for the best part of 2 hours. And so shall I say that we're back at 25 minutes past? Is that okay for everyone? Okay. which is good news as well. So let's keep going. Great, let's get going. We're very slightly ahead of the time we predicted, which is good news. This next report is our agenda item 12. Just checking I hadn't missed one out there. The Southern Gateway and Friary. So this report is to seek approval to submit the Southern Gateway and Friary full business case to the West of England Combined Authority, draw down funding and all the usual delegations. It's a key decision report because it's over £500,000 and once again, it's getting to be Groundhog Day, aren't we? It's Adam to present this report.
Hello again. Yep. So this is part of the Temple Quarter Regeneration Programme. As part of CRSTS, we looked at over-programming schemes to ensure that all the funding could be spent if any schemes weren't going to come forward. This was one of the schemes that we identified in order to provide funding to some key transport elements of the Temple Quarter project. So as such, we worked with the Temple Quarter team to identify what the costs would be and what elements we could incorporate into CRSTS. And then that was assessed by the Combined Authority as part of the over-programming process. The scheme was scored, found to score highly, and therefore prioritised for coming into the CRSTS programme. The scheme includes two key elements, so the Southern Gateway site and the Friary. So the Southern Gateway is a new planned entrance for the train station, which would be on what was a former Quick Fit site just south of Bath Bridges. Whilst there's a fair few things planned at Southern Gateway site, this funding does not cover all of it. So this funding covers the cycle hub, the cycle lane along Bath Road, the pedestrian walkway into the train station and the bus stop. It doesn't incorporate the car park that would be going in at the Southern Gateway site. The car park is there to relocate parking from other parts of Temple Meads to put it in somewhere that frees up more usable development space in and around the station that makes more sense. So it covers those key kind of sustainable transport elements, and then on the Friary, a new bus interchange, so a number of bus stops on the Friary, and closing the Friary traffic set becomes a little cul-de-sac dogleg, if you like, so buses can come in, turn around, stop, and then come back out. So that enables relocation of buses from the ramp to the Friary, and then the ramp can be an enhanced public realm. It gets better security features. There's a number of benefits that enables for the ramp itself. So those are the key elements of the scheme. A business case has been carried out on that. It's found to have a very high BCR of 5.06. We're seeking 12.1 million of funding. That funding is going to come from EDF. And again, that forms part of our match to the wider CRSTS programme. That element has been agreed in terms of being able to allocate EDF to this project. And what we're seeking now is to approve those elements of the project and to improve drawing down that funding onto the project. So the recommendations at the end are approving the submission of that FBC to WECA for them to approve, and again authorising the Exec Director for Growth and Regen in consultation with the Chair to submit the FBC, procure and award the contracts, and invoke any subsequent extensions as necessary.
Any questions? I've got, right, let's go, I'm going to go in reverse order this time. Kaz, Tim, then David.
Thanks for that report, Adam. There's just a few things I wanted to check, fairly minor things. We were shown this as councillors back earlier in the year, and there were several comments made by lots of councillors, almost like a mini consultation. Has that been fed back in yet, or will there be further consultation needed? That's one of my questions. You also say traffic modelling is underway. I'm interested, when will the results of that be made available, and will that include the impact of any nearby low traffic neighbourhoods? And my final question is about, you say that one benefit of doing this on page 325 is a long-term goal of enabling future provision of rapid transit system. I just wonder, does that rapid transit system include the potential for any trams or anything like that at all? Will the Friary just be a bus interchange, or will it be future-proof for anything else in the future?
So the rapid transit route is essentially, one route would be the A4, so stuff that comes along and goes out along the A4 towards Bath. The other potential route, which was in the mass transit strategic outline business case, was a route to South Bristol going in via Mead Street, which is the kind of industrial estate opposite the Southern Gateway site, and then south through St Luke's Road and through South Bristol, out towards the A38. So the technology has not been decided on that yet. It could be an articulated bus, it could be a tram, etc. The other points around whether comments have been included, I'll refer to Manny, if that's okay, and whether any further consultation is required. I was just going to make one further point of clarification, which I forgot to make when I was setting it out, that within the full business case, it states that this will be the only cycle hub, and other cycle hubs will go. That's not the case. Other cycle parking hubs will be retained in the station.
So just in response to the engagement that was undertaken in February, we're just in the process of collating, we've collated all the comments, and we're in the process of reviewing that with our design team to see what we can respond to from a design perspective. In relation to future consultations, so this scheme will require planning permission, so there will be a statutory consultation as part of that process relatively soon. And then with regard to traffic modelling, that is currently underway. And like I said, because we will be submitting a planning application, we will need to include a full transport assessment as part of that. So that will have the detailed sort of impacts in terms of like modelling results.
And if I just clarify, I wouldn't think it would be including any references to low traffic neighbourhoods or livable neighbourhoods at that point, because they won't be progressed far enough to be included in the as an agreed scheme in the modelling.
So what we're effectively saying is that we're submitting a full business case. We want to do the work to submit a full business case, and part of that is obtaining the planning permission, and any planning committee will be needing to satisfy itself that consultation has been done, and then we've got the full modelling as part of that, and any mitigations will be part of a separate process for the detailed design.
So we'll be submitting the full business case, but as part of the planning, there'll be additional modelling provided for the planning application for the car park and development of the site.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's important to note that there is another step with planning permission on this, because there are, I think there's quite a lot of concerns about traffic management and that kind of thing, especially getting into the car park. I think the thing about Temple Meads is we are where we are, but it's the site is a really difficult site, and we have to move the car park away from where it is currently to do the whole new development of the site. But it's not ideal to have it on one side of a dual carriageway where you can't access from both directions. I've made my concerns very clear about having a bus stop for people from South Bristol to actually access the south entrance, and I know you're taking that under consideration, but I do think that is really important, that you don't have two completely different entrances depending on whether you're coming or going from the station. But yeah, I think the fact that this has got to go to planning as well. Just to clarify, will this also have to come back here in terms of the business case for the car park? Because that funding isn't included here. So will there be another part of the scheme coming back to the committee to approve funding for the car park, or how's that work?
No, shall I take that? So the funding for the rest of the project is through a different grant. So it's through Homes England's Brownfield and Infrastructure and Land Grant. So that funding's already secured, and that is coming through the combined authority.
I was going to say something. It'll come to me in a minute.
Something about the bus stops. I think you look like you were going to say something about that, but no.
I was going to answer one of your earlier points, and then
traffic management.
Sorry, gone out of my head. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the scheme is very necessary, but I do have some reservations about how hard the section of the A4 over the Bedminster Bridges will actually be working in terms of sorry, Bath Bridges, my apologies. Thank you for your clarification, Chair. Because it will be very heavily used by both pedestrians trying to access the new southern entrance, the cyclists trying to park their bikes in the cycle hub, drivers trying to park in their multi-storey car park, and a bus interchange. And I'm wondering what measures you're already considering to try and reduce conflict in that area.
Yeah, and just before I come to that, I remember what it was. It was the bus stop on the other side. I've been talking to the team in the last week or two about the designs for that, so we are definitely looking at the inbound bus stop, which is, I agree, a necessity for access to the Gateway site. In terms of that wider piece, we have already carried out an initial feasibility study on a walking, cycling route alongside the existing route. So, you know, it's been a long-term aspiration to do something about that pavement, which is not fit for purpose. And we are seeking funding to do a business case on those elements. Coordinating all of that and the timing of it is going to be challenging because obviously developing structures takes a period of time. So we'll have to look at how that works in terms of when the cycle hub is delivered, when the bus stop becomes active, when the cycle route becomes active, and how we manage that. Because, you know, it's a very reasonable point that if there's a lot more people walking and cycling over that existing very narrow footway, that's not going to be working very well. So we are working on business cases to develop that longer term strategic goal of having a segregated cycle route, and therefore so you can have a full pavement all the way from there to 3 lamps. But it's going to take time to do that, secure funding to build it and build elements. So we will need to plan how that all fits together.
I do worry that actually by doing that we get more people cycling, walking, and there's even more conflict immediately in front of the car park. So I guess that's something that the planning committee will have to look at. Sorry, Manny, you were...
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna add one of the ways that we're kind of mitigating the risk of the sort of phasing and timing delays, well, not delays, but the programming issue, is that we are going to be installing piles on the site when we're doing the rest of the site work. So we're future-proofing the landing points for future structures. So when the time comes to deliver them, we won't have to, you know, it won't be massively disruptive.
It's really nice to hear a bit of coordination and that we do it once. Nick.
Thanks. This is something that I think would have been answered with plans, but I'm just curious as to what exactly is included in here. So, Adam, you said that Friary will become bus only. I haven't read that in any of the papers. I don't see it on a plan, but that road, I know, accesses Temple Key House basement car park. I used to work there, and it's a cul-de-sac. So there's no other way of getting to those buildings and servicing Temple Key Square. What we have got are CGIs, and there's a CGI showing a terrace next to Friary North in the location of the Northern Cycle Park. Maybe that CGI is a future scenario, not something that's being authorised by this scheme, but where the cycle park is now is on the screen, which is being shown to us, and it doesn't look like a cycle park. So what are we authorising with this? I'm still not sure what the scheme is.
So we're just authorising the bus stops at the bottom of the image. When I say bus only, it's more or less bus only. Access to that car park will remain, but beyond that, the roundabout will be closed off. So there won't be the other access routes that come from the rest of the kind of Temple Key estate exiting there. They will go via Temple back instead. But it's those bus stops at the bottom. The Northern Gateway is part of the wider redevelopment programme, and those other elements are part of the Northern Gateway.
It's specifically just those bus stops and the cycle parking and the piles.
Yeah, so those bus stops at the Friary, and then the cycle parking, the pedestrian entrance, the bus stop, and the cycle route at the Southern Gateway site.
You clearer now, Nick?
Sorry, could you just answer the question about the access to the buildings that Nick was talking about?
So yeah, that will be retained. I say bus only. It's more or less bus only. There's the access. If you're coming up the Friary, the access off to the left, that will still be retained.
So, does anyone want, shall I move this then? So, moving the recommendation that we approve the submission of the Southern Gateway and Friary full business case for approval at WECA committee and authorises all the usual delegations. Would anyone like to second that? David? And does anyone want to make any comment? No? Should we move straight to a vote? Who would vote in favour of this? That's carried unanimously. Let's move on swiftly and try and keep up this pace. So the next one is the City Centre Broadmead Union Street area outline business case and delivery. And this is to seek approval to submit Broadmead Union Street area outline business case to the West of England Combined Authority and, if approved, continue to develop the project up to full business case. Before I ask Adam to move this, I do hope that people have seen the statements, and there's a very strong statement of support from Kelvin Blake, thanking us for thinking very carefully about the disabled parking, which is one of the things that was quite controversial. So I was very pleased to see that, and thank officers for rising to that challenge that came out of the consultation. Adam, would you like to introduce this?
Yeah, okay, so this is quite a big one, so forgive me if I'm looking at my screen a bit and plucking things out from it. So this is the third and final part of the red route, so it's probably the key bit in the middle that enables the red route to happen. There's two, I will go through the different elements of it, but there's two key really big bits, which is the redesign of the junction at the top of Union Street where the sale structures are currently, where the Bay Horse is, and then there's the closure of Horsefair and Penn Street to traffic to pedestrianise that area. So this again comes originally from the city centre framework that was launched in 2018 and then has been kind of refreshed and reviewed as part of the city centre development and delivery plan. And that key part about pedestrianising Horsefair Penn Street is about making the city centre a more attractive place for people to spend time, pedestrianising it, taking out the traffic. We're all very supportive of buses, but buses are also very large, often noisy vehicles. So we're trying to rationalise bus routes, make them more efficient, and create better pedestrian and cycle spaces as part of the scheme. So going to the specific elements, there's that key bit about pedestrianising Horsefair and Penn Street. To note that the scheme will close it, but it won't do the Urban Realm project there that it needs. That's partly about timing and funding, because there are a number of large developments happening in the area and due to come forward, like the galleries, but also Debenhams and potentially things around Callaghill Court in future. So it's not the best time to do it. We can spend a bit more time designing it, having closed it. There will be some meanwhile activities taken, so we'll remove unnecessary street furniture, we'll do some kind of cultural interventions to make it feel less like a road as an interim, while we then design up and seek funding for doing the full job on that. And that's likely probably to extend into the DDP plans around Castle Park as well and Newgate. The next section then is removing most of the traffic from High Street, Wine Street, Union Street and Newgate. So in part that is about redirecting buses to different routings and using Fairfax Street, but it's also longer term a kind of change to the feel of Newgate in particular, which is the road that runs behind the back of the galleries, enabling the new galleries development when that's built out to much better connect to Castle Park and connect the city centre to Castle Park. So there will still be access to all the businesses, but it will be timed, the same as sort of Horsefair and Penn Street. There'll be timed access for deliveries, that sort of thing. So a significant reduction in traffic volumes going through that area. Making the Pit A taxi only. That's a little road by the side of Tesco's, really steep. And then The other key one I mentioned is alterations to the Union Street, Rupert Street, Lewinsmead, Lower Magdalen Street, Haymarket, Horsefair Junction. There's quite a lot of roads meet there. We'll go through that design shortly, but quite significant changes being enabled as part of that. So if you see the image that comes up, it basically enables a right turn for buses from Union Street towards the James Barton roundabout. So this then enables the red route to go straight through the middle of the city, straight into bus lanes and out onto the M32. We also enable buses to turn left into Union Street coming down Haymarket, which again is the other direction of the red route. And then as part of it, we incorporate a number of segregated cycle routes. So linking up the James Barton roundabout all the way through to Christmas Street. So it'll provide a segregated route through Haymarket and Lewinsmead to the little park where you can then turn left to get into Christmas Street, and that will link through to the city centre route that we discussed earlier, and also north-south connections, so connecting the Park Row scheme via Lower Magdalen Street and then via Silver Street, Union Street, and then onto High Street, Wine Street, all the way through to Victoria Street. So you'll have a very continuous segregated cycle network being delivered as part of the scheme. And then there's a number of new taxi ranks, loading bays and disabled parking bays. This is one of the key elements of the consultation, where we engaged with a lot of disability groups and taxi forums to ensure that we were providing adequate provision. Obviously, Horsefair and Pen Street at the moment has quite a lot of taxi bays, disabled parking, as does Union Street. So we've tried to re-provide that where we can, and then following consultation, we provided additional locations closer to the main shopping area, so specifically on Bridewell Street, additional eight disabled bays in there. The galleries development itself will also provide 20 additional disabled parking bays when that is built out in addition to what is being replaced. So overall, an increase in disabled parking bays. Then we have a new pedestrian crossing across Bond Street. So this came about as part of the Debenhams redevelopment. So that's providing a signal pedestrian crossing on, if you like, the M32 side of the James Barton roundabout to get across from where Debenhams is to where the car park is. And then over 1 kilometre of cycle routes, as I've just discussed. There are other elements that will be delivered following when we do the Horsefair Pen Street. So there are some other cycle routes as well, specifically around sort of Fairfax Street, Broadwear, Lower Castle Street area that will come forward as the next part of the scheme, probably in CRSTS 2. Then that enables the introduction of the new rapid transit service, which we've talked about quite a bit already, trying to reduce as many buses on Union Street as possible, but some are likely to still go through there. I think the 1 and 2 are being considered for going through there. And then obviously all of this changes all of the bus routes that go through that part of the city centre. So the long-term aim is that they go via Fairfax Street, but we need to understand when the galleries will be happening, because when the galleries gets redeveloped, we're going to have to close Fairfax Street for a period of time for demolition. So there is an alternative route proposed when that happens, which will be to use Baldwin Street, High Street, Wine Street as the alternative to Fairfax Street. Long term, once galleries is all completed, it will all be via Fairfax Street. If the galleries is delayed, we may go via Fairfax Street for a period of time as well. We'll have to take that decision when we have a better understanding of the galleries development. So there's been a lot of consultation on it, as I've said. That's not going to stop. We know with schemes like this that we consult, and then not everyone necessarily engages at the time. You start digging up outside someone's business, and then they get much more involved. So we'll be carrying on that engagement, particularly with businesses in the area throughout the project, to ensure that everyone is aware of what's going on, and that we're providing assistance where we can, and providing any grants where we can for sustainable transport options, looking at things like providing e-cargo bikes, etc., for deliveries to try and mitigate the impact of the scheme on businesses. So this is moving on to the kind of business case element itself. This is very similar to Bedminster Bridges, where we have a OBC that we are seeking to approve and get approval to delegate sign-off of the FBC at the same time, so that we can bring forward starting the works, in essence. So we will be seeking approval as part of that for the full funding, in essence, to enable us to start building the scheme before the full business case is fully complete. We will still be doing the full business case. Similar reasons that we feel that is low risk to Bedminster Bridges, in that the BCR is over 2.5. which is classified as high, and that's for quite a high cost scheme, which we also believe we can value engineer down a bit because there's a lot of cost in there for utilities. So we're confident that the benefits will stack up. We've done a lot of engagement, we've done a lot of discussions, and we provided a lot of mitigation following that engagement. So again, we feel like the risk of approval is low in that sense without having completed the FBC. So I think that's mainly what I wanted to say. So just to be very clear on the recommendations, it will be to submit the outline business case to the combined authority, then to accept and spend the funding to procure and award the necessary contracts, to take it up to FBC, and then to delegate authority to approve the FBC to the exec director with the chair, and then also to enable us to secure and start utilising the funding for construction in parallel to seeking FBC approval. So it will be to accept and spend the funding and procure and award the necessary contracts for project delivery, and that enables us to reduce to bring forward the date of delivery by several months.
Thanks, Adam. And it's not quite all the usual delegations, is it? Because it is about actually accelerating the work. So apologies for casting that in the wrong light. So I've got Emma, Rob, and then Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. It's really exciting to see this all taking shape. On the Haymarket, it says there's a two-way segregated cycle lane, and looking at the artist's impression, it doesn't quite cover it, and I just want to make that very clear, because currently, and this has always been like one of my biggest bugbears in Bristol, especially cycling, is the conflict between buses and cyclists as you come off St James Barton Roundabout and go down the Haymarket. It literally just flings cyclists into a stack of buses usually, and then the rest of the cycle lane, which is segregated, is the other side of all the bus stops, so you've kind of got to fling out into traffic. Is that conflict going to not be there anymore?
So that there will be a fully segregated cycle route in the middle of the road. So it comes from the James Barton. So if I take you, say, from Moon Street on the A38 coming down under the 5102 building, so there will be a cycle route down the middle of the road there. So there's a cycle route going to come through Moon Street as part of the scheme, but also anyone coming down the A38 will be able to join a shared widened pavement through that central section, then use the crossing to get to the central pavement that goes around the James Barton Roundabout. So you go round there, and then you'll cross over onto the central island again, and then onto a segregated cycle route down the middle, which will then take you along the side of Lewinsmead, opposite where the bus stops are, until you get to the park. And it'll go alongside the edge of the park and then turn left into Christmas Street, and then Nelson Street or Broad Quay. Broad Quay there, I think, and then through to the city centre cycle route. So it'll be fully segregated all the way through. The reason we've put it in the middle is because of the vast numbers of bus stops and bus infrastructure along this section, that having a bus stop bypass would be nigh on impossible here. So that's why it's focused in the central part.
Yeah, that makes sense. Brilliant. And can I just ask one more? So, and I know that this is something that I've raised with the chair and yourselves, is obviously there is going to be trees that are going to be lost, and thank you for sort of explaining that, but obviously there are some mitigations to that tree loss, and I just thought it'd be good if you could sort of tell the committee about that.
Yep, sure. I discussed this with the team earlier today. So there are 3 trees in that central area which are lost. So one tree is lost because the new bus right turn will be going right through the middle of it. Another tree is lost because the buses coming out of Lower Moreland Street turning left will be going through it. We did initially seek to lose that movement, but we had a lot of opposition to that from the bus company and from stakeholders, so we've redesigned to retain that movement, but it does mean that tree is lost. And then the final tree, which is one in the middle, ends up right in the middle of the pedestrian crossing, so again can't be retained. As part of this, the trees are all grade B2, which is considered moderate quality. Their trunks are sort of 38 to 49 centimetres. Under the tree replacement strategy, that would mean around about 8 trees would need to be replaced for those 3, but we're going to be replacing it with 11 trees would need to go in. So we're actually going to be introducing 31 trees as a response to the loss of those 3 trees. We're also completing a carbon management plan, and that will be captured within the carbon management plan. So yeah, we're doing what we can to mitigate it. There are very significant benefits to the sustainable transport element. Obviously, there is a disbenefit to trees. There will be more trees going in directly in the local area as well. So the sales area is intended to have some trees, and there will be some trees going back into that space once it's been redesigned as well.
Gain of trees overall. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
I think it's worth me saying at this point that I've been quite anxious about this and have really made sure that there's really no other option. I have sadly been convinced that this is what makes the scheme viable. And I think it's really good that we've actually listened to the concerns, particularly of First Bus and North Somerset Council, about the lack of that right turn. So, yes, we're losing trees, but yes, we've gained something and we've listened to stakeholders. Who is next? Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's 2 questions. The first, it's great to see pretty much, well, most streets have sort of segregated cycle infrastructure going in, or at least an improvement on what's there right now. But I suppose there's 2 grey areas for me, which actually it's a grey area at the moment, which is whether you will be able to cycle and not be, being unlawful down Horsefair, and also whether it is currently unlawful to cycle down the centre of Broadmead, where the German market is at the Christmas. Is that, because I always thought that was a cycle route that's allowed. And will the Horsefair still retain any way of passing through there on a bike or not?
So cycling through Broadmead is not prohibited. We don't put in a cycle route because we don't want to encourage people to cycle quickly through the centre of Broadmead. Horsefair, our view is that we would take a similar approach because long term it should be a pedestrianised space. There is a different approach with Penn Street where there is a kind of clear north-south desire line. So we are considering a segregated cycle route on Penn Street because of the key kind of link up to the crossing. So I think the idea would be that there are other cycle routes you can use to go east-west. North-south, we are looking at Penn Street as an option.
But it's not technically unlawful. You're not prohibited from doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other question is, and it's maybe a boring one, and maybe it can be covered by something else. But I noticed in the papers that it's we do lose parking revenue, 263k, due to some of the loss of pay and display parking. Are we cognizant of that, and is that going to be made up in another way? Is it going to be just people going to council car parks, or?
So it is a slightly tricky issue. If a parking bay is making X amount of money and you take it out, are you losing all that money? Well, some cars will go to council car parks, some cars will go to other council on-street parking, some will go to private car parks. We're looking at it in the round, so there is some CAS money allocated to mitigate loss of parking income. We're developing the transport investment plan to better understand these issues because when you implement a bus gate and it generates income, that should offset the cost that you get from losing parking, for example. So we're including it in the papers to note that this issue is being looked at. The transport investment plan will look at it more holistically, and we will be assessing it at a wider level across all of the schemes to make sure that the budgets are properly managed going forward.
I'm assuming that I'm just going to say I'm assuming on Penn Street there's going to be so much pedestrianisation around that we're going to need red surfacing. But let's not preempt that too early. Alex.
Just in relation to the car parking capacity point, there will of course be the loss of several large privately owned multi-storey car parks as the city centre is redeveloped, the galleries, Rupert Street, etc. others. So that will have an impact on availability, and that will presumably drive demand towards the council-owned car parks.
I'm assuming also that some of the budget will be replaced by improved council tax because of all the units going in there. But maybe that's a bit of a zero-sum game. But you'd hope that there's a lot more people living in the area, a lot more council tax being paid, as long as they're not all students. Tim, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks. So, you won't be surprised to hear that my main concern about this scheme is the impact that it's going to have on bus users rather than cyclists. So we're planning to reroute a lot of buses along Fairfax Street, which at the moment is a very nasty underground street, but we're planning to do this ahead of the redevelopment of the galleries, which we're then relying on to create a nicer environment in that area for people. There seems to be a lot of risk there, you know, to do. Firstly, we're doing the work and then we're immediately going to have to close it for 18 months. Secondly, we actually don't know what's going to come forward from the galleries redevelopment. To me, that seems like a lot of risk. We could end up disrupting bus services considerably at a time when we're still trying to encourage people to use them and come back into town on the buses, and that kind of disruption can put people off if they don't know where to catch their buses from, and the environment is, you know, not a nice one where they're standing with building works and all sorts going on. So I'm really concerned about that. The other thing I did want to raise is about, while the work is taking place, we've considered what will happen as an outcome for disabled people in terms of parking and that kind of thing. But while the works are actually taking place, how are we going to make sure that we understand what the issues of the actual works taking place might be for disabled people, so that we can ensure that we mitigate those actions? I mean, one thing that's just been raised with me is the lifts in the galleries are a way of getting from a very low point to a very high point in Bristol, you know, without going up Union Street in a wheelchair. So are we considering those kinds of things when we're looking at all this work?
Yeah, so on the first point about Fairfax Street, if we're due to start putting buses down Fairfax Street and 6 months later it's going to be closed for demolition, then we won't put buses down Fairfax Street. So we have the alternative route, which is Baldwin Street, High Street, Wine Street, Newgate, which would fulfil the same function. So we'll take that view when we have because we don't know when the galleries is going to be demolished at this point in time. The bus stops themselves, the one bus stop is close to Nelson Street, and then the next bus stop is beyond Fairfax Street on Broadway. So you wouldn't be in a waiting environment underneath the galleries. The galleries itself does propose a much nicer environment under Fairfax Street, but yeah, it's a reasonable point that it's not a particularly nice environment at the moment, so we wouldn't be asking people to wait under there in terms of bus passengers. In terms of disabled access during the works, we have worked with WESIL to do like disability audits of the scheme, and we're going to continue that relationship with them to inform how we detail design the scheme and how we manage the scheme as well. So we will be working with disabled groups to address those sort of issues. I think is a very, very, very good point. Like during the works is a really key thing, and it's as well as disabled parking spaces, it's also the shops and the businesses, and how do we keep them open and working well whilst we're doing all this work. So that will be a big strand of the work, is engaging with businesses, engaging with disabled drivers, etc., to ensure everyone can still get to where they need to get to whilst all the disruption is happening.
And I can certainly say that, well, I've been asking these questions and I've been assured that there'll be no loss of disabled parking throughout any of the construction periods of any of these things, and that I've made it very, very clear that we need to minimise the changes to both the routes and stopping. So I don't want it chopping and changing every few months. We once we've got that kind of view of what's going to happen with the galleries and so on, then we really need to set the bus routes and keep them for as long as we possibly can, and minimise the number of changes.
Yeah, and I think Adam addressed this, but the point is, once you get out of your car as a disabled person, you need to be able to move around, and if there are all sorts of works blocking pavements and that kind of thing, that can be really difficult. So we need to make sure that we understand all those issues. Yeah.
We are actually on the forward plan is something that looks at the way we manage construction, both of our own highways and working with developers. I'm hoping that comes to committee, be passed, and then it will influence our Transport Development Management Handbook to make sure that we give greater consideration, particularly to pavements and the needs of disabled people. Kaz.
Chair, I just wanted to echo my concern about making sure that the city is open for business and buses are run, as it's mentioned in page 374 of the report. But I'm also pleased to see that as a result of the consultation, 75% of respondents agree with the idea of the improvement of the Broadmead area. I think that's really exciting. And it's good to hear it's got the kind of overwhelming majority of people for it, and also in terms of consultation, great to hear about the disabled parking, and also we've listened to the bus companies concerned about the right turn from the bus station. Just on the very last point, I know we had a private meeting about the buses coming down in Union Street being signal controlled and they'd be in the bus lane, and you sort of, when I expressed concerns about cyclists going through red lights and the potential crash with buses, you assured me that all the cyclists would behave themselves and stop at the red lights. I just wanted to get that in the public arena.
I think what I said was I think good infrastructure, good cycling infrastructure does lead to good behaviour, and I have observed in London a lot better adherence to red lights where there's that really good segregated infrastructure. I'm not going to be able to speak for all the cyclists. And especially, I think some of our cyclists are put under a lot of pressure to get around very, very fast by their low pay in Uberoo, should we say, or just some of the delivery conditions that people work in. Nick.
Thanks, Chair. I support the outcomes of this scheme, but I am still the Vice Chair of Audit, which isn't a job that I volunteered for, nor one that I am rewarded for. But I think there is a responsibility to point out that governance is important, and good governance adds value to a process. What we've got here is that contracts will be signed and work will be started before the full business case is approved. And starting works before all of the information is available can lead to cost overruns, which we will see on the very next item on the agenda. And we've also being asked to delegate the full business case to the Executive Director, so that final decision is handed over from councillors and that political accountability for the scheme is reduced. And without that accountability, we've seen Bristol Beacon, Bristol Energy in the past. I think we shouldn't, as a group of politicians, hand over accountability in that way. We should be agile and be prepared to arrange meetings to suit the needs of the projects that we're putting forward, rather than having those projects work around our meeting calendar set a year in advance. It's helpful that way, but we can also help the process by making sure that we deliver on our duties rather than delegate them away.
I think that's a really good challenge, Nick. I don't know if Adam, you want to come back on that at all?
Yeah, I take the point. It's not a question. It's a valid point. We've set out why we believe it is low risk. Personally, I would say the business case process has its benefits and its disbenefits. We are where we are with the CRSTS programme in terms of needing to deliver it, which is why we propose this approach.
I'm going to move a vote to the recommendation, and I'm not going to read it all out. It should be on the screen now, but noting that Nick's final point, that we would be handing over delegated authority. So would anyone like to second this? Kaz. All those in favour? I can't see your hand, Nick. This because it's not up. Okay, so that's everyone other than Nick has voted in favour. Nick, you are anyone abstaining and voting against? So Nick, you're voting against. I'm going to take away that thought about being agile and being able to arrange meetings to suit the needs of the projects rather than necessarily suit the timetable of the political cycle. And I think it's a point well made, and it's a challenge I accept in future, so that I'm hoping to minimise the number of times we do this in the future. So that's carried 7 votes for and 1 vote against. So let's move on. The next one is agenda item 14, to seek approval for reallocation of funds in order to complete the Old City Queen Charlotte King Street Improvement Project. This is a key decision report because it involves a decision of over 500,000. And once again, Adam, you're going to introduce and outline the report.
Yeah, so Old City King Street is a series of pedestrian and cycle improvements in the Old City, Queen Charlotte Street, King Street area. It's funded through Active Travel Fund 4 and is currently in construction. There have been various issues with the scheme. When the scheme started, basically there was incomplete utility information. When that was discovered, it meant there was a delay to the scheme. So that's added some additional costs as well as some of the utility costs as well. We've had various other delays on site for a variety of reasons. And then there has also been additional costs on the project from funding the automatic gates that went in the Old City, which came out of this project budget. So overall, that has led to a budget pressure of 882k. As I say, there's various sources for that are set out in the report, and we've looked at a variety of ways to fund that overspend. The one that we've arrived at as being the most suitable is to utilise EDF funding. So the Southern Gateway project that we spoke about earlier initially had a budget of 13.1 million and an EDF allocation of 13.1 million. The forecast budget for that scheme is now 12.1 million, which frees up £1 million of EDF that we propose to not transfer in full, but make available for this project to use as it needs. So the current projected overspend is, as I say, 882k. That does include an ongoing contingency of 290,000 for completing the scheme. So there is a degree of contingency within the project as well. We are also doing an officer decision notice to seek approval for 450k of integrated transport block funding to be allocated to the project to enable it to keep progressing whilst this decision is agreed. And then that will be repaid from the EDF funding. If we don't reallocate funding, then obviously works would have to stop and we'd be left with a scheme that would be incomplete. Obviously, there are a number of issues that have occurred on the project, and we'll be carrying out lessons learned at the end of the project to identify how we can better deal with those sort of issues and not hopefully have them occur again. There is one exempt element which I've discussed with a number of committee members earlier. It's a relatively small thing, but just relates to some ongoing conflicts that we are seeking to resolve on the project. So in terms of the recommendation, it is to approve the reallocation of 882k of EDF to complete the works. As discussed, there will be £1 million available. I assume at this point, I say if anyone wants to go into exempt session, we can do to discuss that element.
Sorry, I may still not understand. So why did it say 1 million in one place and 882 in another? It's because that's...
So we have 1 million available. The key point to understand is that £1 million is part of our match funding for CRSTS. So as part of CRSTS, we have to provide 20% match. So we have £1 million on this project that is not needed by that project. We're making that available for this project. This is assigning 882k. This is agreeing an increase to the budget of 882k. There is £1 million there. If we need to go over 882k, there's another 120k. If not, the remainder of that 118k will be assigned to another city centre project so that we are capturing the full match. The important thing is that we still capture that full £1 million of match against the CRSTS programme.
Thank you for clarifying.
No questions? No comments? Don?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very complex project, actually. Medieval streets. I don't know if anyone remembers back. It's a cross-siloed project, really. It began actually with Nicola Beach looking at the consolidation of the bins down there, which, if we remember, were several companies leaving them and being collected at different times of the day, overflowing all down there, and actually the medieval centre of our city looking quite disgraceful compared to almost any European city, equivalent city, would have had long ago had it tidied up and made a showpiece of it. Then obviously licensing, having tables out, allowing businesses to do that, restricting traffic, and then obviously having a car park for a hotel in the middle of the area where the traffic was restricted, and having to go through negotiations as to how we supported that hotel and other businesses down the road. So it's been best described as a very busy project in terms of resourcing, I think is fair to say, and a lot of technical work gone in from our parking services in terms of that barrier and other barriers as well. So a lot of unknowns on this project. I don't think we've ever really celebrated the fact that it's kind of coming to a conclusion actually now, and looked at some before and after, and actually really realised what we've achieved here. It's something very special for the city, very special for the businesses down there. And if you go down there for almost any morning, especially on a sunny day now, it is absolutely heaving with people walking up and down, and with market stalls. And it doesn't surprise me that it needs a bit more money. That you could ever predict a project like this, what the budget would be, is always a little bit finger in the air. And if it's an extra 800,000, I think that's going to be an absolutely excellent value. And we should organise some sort of celebration actually, and just take account of the journey we've been on with this, because a lot of people have been involved in it, have worked really hard, and given Ben to start off with, also our licensing folks and others and Bristol Waste to put a lot into it. And parking services I'll reference again, because we went through some challenging times with those barriers.
If anyone can track down the former deputy leader Simon Cook from the old Liberal Democrat days before we had a mayor, he'd probably want to come and be part of the party as well, because he was a very long-term advocate of pedestrianising King Street as well. So
if I could just clarify on that point, the gates were additional scope. I wouldn't necessarily class them as overspend. They were just additional scope, and it was hoped that we'd be able to cover the costs. But things being that they are, we haven't been able to cover the costs. So it's just an extra bit of scope that was delivered, and it was very complicated. And this has been going on for a while now to get it all finished. So
I am mindful of next challenge that. Notwithstanding what Don said, that we really should try and get our sums right as early as we can, and we shouldn't be seeing this sort of overspend. But I'm also mindful that this is a very complicated, multi-dimensional project with a lot of moving parts. Did I see a hand? David, was it?
Yes, and thank you, John. Just checking my page numbers. On page 485 of the report, it shows the line of Baldwin Street, and at the very western end of Baldwin Street, there looks to be a change of direction on for traffic. Like you could turn left onto from Colston Avenue onto Baldwin Street. Is that correct?
is this on the old City King Street?
Yeah.
So I've been looking at reports individually from the. So I haven't got. But could we get to page 405?
485.
485. Sorry.
Keep going. That's the one. That's the one. So on where it says on the left-hand side of that diagram, you see there's a grey swathe.
Oh, that's just an old map. That's the old former layout of the road.
Yeah.
So yeah, you won't be turning left there from into Baldwin Street.
I thought that was a bit of a major change to be including. Yes.
I'm going to move. Can I move this? That we approve the reallocation of 882 of EDF to complete the works. Anyone would like to second that? Rob's hand went up very quickly and very high, so I'm going to Rob. And all those in favour? Unanimous. Let's move on. We were really well ahead of time when we took our break. We're just about where we're programmed to be now. So going to be quite keen to keep us moving. So the next one of these is the procurement of new contract supply, installation and maintenance of metrobus iPoints. The purpose of this report is to provide background on the metrobus iPoints, details of the upcoming review being undertaken by metrobus partners to consider the future requirements for iPoints and the options available for managing the end of the existing supplier contract. Again, it's over £500,000, and again, I'm going to turn to Adam to briefly outline this project. Hopefully we can do this at some pace. We did allow 20 minutes for this, so if we could try and be mindful of keeping to time, as we're now just about on time.
So we have 90 iPoints across the Metrobus network. So they're the big kind of monolith things that you see at the Metrobus stops. When the Metrobus was planned, there was a lot of discussion at the time about enabling cash payments at the stops. So it was very important not to have people getting on the bus and paying cash. So in order to prevent that, we enabled that cash payment at the iPoint themselves. Nowadays, obviously, you've got a lot of tap on, tap off. The use of those ticketing points is very, very low. So it's like 4.1% of tickets. But the cost of maintaining them is quite high. So we're approaching a point in the contract where we need to decide whether to extend the contract by 2 years or not. If we extend it, it will be under the same terms. And I think our view is we need to rethink about how we're maintaining the iPoints. So the proposed option is basically to develop a more flexible contract that will have a number of different options to look at. So you could retain everything, you could remove the ticketing, you could remove the RTI, you could remove the journey planning, etc. So there's 6 different options we could look at, and create a new contract that will give more flexibility across the iPoint estate, if you like. So the 2 options available at the end of the contract are to extend and keep the current contract, or to not extend it, and then either decommission and remove all of the iPoints, or to supply and maintain iPoints with a different contract. So we don't recommend removal of the iPoints because we do think they have a lot of value in terms of the quality of the network, and metro buses are our prime public transport provision. We do think, however, that some of the maintenance costs are excessive and what they're providing is unnecessary, or to some extent unnecessary, and therefore we don't think option 1 is a good idea either, which is to extend the current contract. So the recommendation is to go with option 2B, which is to procure a new contract, and that will enable us to review how we maintain the iPoints and what is within them. So it's basically to note the background of that and authorise the exec director to implement option 2B, and take all steps to prepare the contract and implement the contract as necessary.
And I just think it's worth adding that I think this is a demonstration of the success of the Metrobus project in raising the bar for the whole bus market, because it was quite difficult to encourage the tap-on, tap-off and cashless payments for the bus operators. This was the trigger, actually, for that step change to take place. The introduction of Metrobus, and then tap-on, tap-off and contactless payment. We've seen it being a massive success. So I think actually these have been successful and made themselves somewhat redundant, which I think is a good news story. So any questions? Any comments? Kaz?
I think the only question I've got, Chair, is about the consultation. I'm supportive of 2B, but will that be like a normal sort of citywide consultation? How will we go about that?
Yeah. So yeah, we'll do a full consultation particularly with passengers, focusing on users of the metrobus.
I'm going to move that the committee notes the background to the existing iPoints, options for the future, and effectively endorses option 2B. Anyone like to second that? David. 4? Unanimous. Let's move on. The next agenda item 16 is funding for the supported bus services task and finish group. This is to seek approval of the drawdown of £1 million from reserves to set aside for supported bus services and the delegation of the award of bus service contracts for that additional £1 million to the supported bus services task and finish group. And I'd like to add my thanks to Tim for chairing very well a group. In fact, that group is addressing some of the points that Mr. Ridgewell made earlier today, specifically around hoping to look at nighttime buses, earlier running, later running, and focused on a Friday and Saturday if that's all we can afford. And I'd also like to thank Tim for finding the reserves. And although the budget amendment didn't pass, for seeing exactly the what you hope the budget amendment to achieve here, and I'd like to thank officers for clarifying that actually the reason that was put in reserve was no longer needed, so it frees us up to do something really interesting and hopefully positive about this. Would you like to say anything about this, Adam? This is, once again, Adam going to introduce this, and it's over £500,000 by definition.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just clarify the numbers. I mean, it's a very similar discussion what we had previously with the task and finish group funding. There's essentially 800k left over from that process. We've got this additional $1 million, so we are seeking to approve the spending of that 1.8 million and to provide authority to the task and finish group to decide on which services to fund with that funding. So the recommendation is just to approve the drawdown of the £1 million and then enable the task and finish group to determine the services. They're due to be coming in August, so again we need to move fairly quickly, end of August, need to move fairly quickly to determine which services we want to allocate the funding to.
And I'm hoping Nick thinks that at least there's some no democratic deficit here, because at least a task and finish group is looking at it, and that's politically balanced and so on. Would anyone like to make any comments or questions? Tim?
Yeah, just like to say thanks to members of the task and finish group who've all turned up diligently and put the work in. It's not going to be as easy this time to select what we can fund, because we've looked at far more things than we know we're going to be able to fund this time. So, but I'm hoping that we'll get some outcomes that the city is, really will find useful. Yeah, it's a shame we had to add 5 minutes to our agenda today when we could have approved this at full council, but there you go.
Let's just move swiftly on. I'm sending my apologies to the next task and finish group. I think Emma, is it Emma? Yeah, you're deputising for me, so thank you for that. And so I'm going to move that we approve the drawdown of this reserve and authorise the task and finish group, chaired by Tim. And I'm going to invite Tim to second this, despite what he just said.
Second.
Okay. All those in favour of this? Carried unanimously. Let's move on. Agenda item 17 is an update on residents' parking scheme. This is to update on current proposals for new RPS schemes and consider how we might bring them forward, and also to consider whether or not we might divide some of the existing size to reduce their size and limit trips within the zones. This is just a report for information. This is really to enable officers to think about the quantum of activity we're going to be doing and to prioritise it, because we're probably, I'm going to be blunt, we're probably not going to be able to bring forward all the residence parking schemes that I seem to hear that councillors would want. So this is particularly helping us to quantify how long is the piece of string and some ways that we might prioritise what's bringing forward. It's only for information. But if we do want to change any of those priorities, then that's something that we'll, I don't think we need a vote on it. We're just going to ask officers to add that to the list and then to do a prioritisation exercise for us. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Adam?
Yeah, just it's an update. I mean, we have limited resources in the local transport team, so what we are doing is procuring a project manager to go through this report in essence, look at how much it would cost, how much resources will be needed to then bring a decision paper back to committee, if possible September. If that's not possible, then it might be more like October. As part of that, we need to think about what areas to consider and what criteria we need to agree. So that will be part of the process. I've set out there areas for consideration for new RPS. So areas from the previous RPS that weren't delivered when the scheme was done previously. We've also had East Bristol highlighted and also around major trip generators. So I know Southmead Hospital has been mentioned. Brabazon already has proposals for an RPS as part of the arena mitigations. Around CPNN, the Downs, if we were to put parking charges in there, we'd need to consider residents parking around those areas as well. And obviously there's going to be quite a few asks from what we've seen, so therefore we need some criteria to decide how best to prioritise those, which we will develop, and then we can bring that back to committee to say we've looked at how much it will cost, we've looked at how much resource we'll need to bring in, and that may need to be external, whether it's permanent or temporary, we'll determine that. This will be what the costs are, and we will seek to fund that from CAS and then repay the CAS spend through any income that the schemes generate. And here's our criteria and here's the various areas, and then committee can make a decision on what they want to prioritise at that point in time.
Got Rob, then Emma, then Kaz, then David.
Everyone's got a view on parking. I think I'll just start by saying what I think the criteria orders should be. I mean, I think proximity to the city centre, proximity to the existing schemes that we have are the two obvious ones. But I would add a third. I don't know whether it's covered really by the others, which is sort of lack of spare parking capacity in the area, because there are some areas where it's a nuisance that people park on the pavement, although you know there's a question mark there about how space is managed. But I think for me it's like, can you actually park a vehicle in that area if you're a resident? That is quite a key consideration. I'd say the others are probably less key, although you know the presence of Liverpool Neighbourhood Scheme, given it wasn't initially included in East Bristol Liverpool Neighbourhood, that's probably not a key factor at this stage, because it would take a lot to implement at the same time as doing that scheme. They are doing that in South Bristol, of course. So that's my views on the criteria, but then also I do think some of the zones need to change in terms of their size. I definitely think Eastern St Phillips residents parking scheme, from what I've heard, is a bit like that. It's people who live at one end of it can drive quite close to the centre of town in the same scheme area and park, which isn't really the idea of a parking scheme. And there's potentially quite a few west of Gloucester Road that are quite large, so we could look at that. It's good to see integration with the Transport Movement Plan and, of course, the Curbside Strategy, which obviously I chair that task and finish group and we'll be talking about in a second. And then finally, I do think it is good to have some clear timelines for this coming back to committee, rather than in due course. I think there are communities that are chomping at the bit to get this sort of parking management implemented. It's been a long time that they've been waiting, in an era when it was flat out refused by the previous administration. So I think we do need to have some urgency to this. I appreciate the challenges of finding the resources, Adam says, but I do think the urgency is definitely there in communities.
Emma.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's no secret that our area is really, really wants one. I get several emails a week, I think, wanting one. Interestingly, I got an email yesterday, and one of the things that they brought up was proximity, which was, we're hearing a rumour that St Andrews might be getting one. That's actually going to make things worse for us. So I think getting those parameters and seeing that ripple effect will be, because there's going to be a point where that ripple effect isn't going to go because it's too far out for people to do the commute. Interestingly, I'm going to tell an anecdote from this week. A council officer, I will not name them, I saw them with their putting a bike on their car at the end of my road. And I said, I didn't know you lived around here. They said, no, I don't. I just park here and I cycle into City Hall. So it does happen. That was at the, it definitely happens. So yeah, I think looking at that proximity, there is going to get to a point where that's not an element that actually factors it. One thing that I think does need to be taken in consideration and often comes up, and I haven't really seen much detail on this, is HMOs, where you get houses of multiple occupancy with maybe 5, 6, 7 people, especially in bigger houses. Actually, sometimes they're not even big houses; they've just been adapted, where there's multiple cars. Those people aren't necessarily a household in a family sense, and I think there needs to be clarity, because as more HMOs happen, we can't sort of let that be a loophole. But at the same time, I just think there needs to be a little bit of extra work done on HMOs so that there's clarity around that subject.
Yeah, so there are some policy elements that this would pick up as well. So
right.
Councillor Bryan mentioned about size of zones. That's something we'd want to look at in terms of kind of subdividing zones. I'm pretty sure we did cover off HMOs when we did the RPS policy paper previously for Cabinet. So that's certainly something we would revisit as part of this to ensure that any policy is taking into proper account the impact of HMOs.
Thank you.
I think it's going to be, particularly for new HMOs, I think we should be quite explicit that there's a limit to how many they'll get. Kaz, do you want to go next?
Just wanted to make 2 points, Chair. One is you're using CAS money, but it's going to be repaid by the RPS. I kind of welcome that. I'm just a little bit concerned that we've seen a few little schemes coming forward being paid for by CAS money. For example, the cycle lane painting. Just a concern in mind that CAS money might be being eaten up by these little schemes. So that's one comment, but this one's fine. My other comment is on Cycleway Hospital, as you mentioned it. Obviously, there are issues around these major centres of employment, but if you look at Cycleway Hospital, there are people in Cycleway ward, my ward, who own a car or a van for business maybe, and they're not going to have the same level of income as somebody in Clifton ward. So there's an issue about the how much the RPS rate might be if we sort of start introducing it in these local areas close to wards where we've got areas of deprivation.
Yeah, I think they're both reasonable points. Yeah, we'll take that into account.
Thank you, Chair. I just also would like to see added to the scope of this document some direction given to Transport Development Management about how RPSs are actually defined when a residence parking scheme is mandated by planning. So, for instance, I have developments in my ward where RPSs are defined as part of the scheme, but they don't include surrounding streets, and I am concerned that the surrounding streets will just get clogged with cars from the development. So I would like to see some direction in that respect, please.
Yeah, I think I would add in to criteria presence of local developments in terms of criteria, but that is a challenge in general. That if you approve a low car development and there isn't an RPS around it, then people can still have cars and park in nearby streets. So yeah, there is an ongoing challenge of how we manage that, and the use of RPS is one way of managing it, obviously.
And I certainly would be glad to go back to a situation where we're asking Section 106 contributions in that sort of situation where there's going to be a demonstrable impact on, of low car development on existing residents. Don.
Thanks. You do have a problem with what you mandate in terms of parking controls within a planning agreement, because they would all be subject to consultation later on. So you can't be too specific, because ultimately you don't know if you'll be taking the money, but you don't know what you're taking it for, legally speaking. A number of things on the agenda today are proposing to use CAS money, and of course that was the work of the last administration, and it wasn't very vocally supported by other parties or any of the parties in here at the time, actually. So I think it is worth referencing the fact that we have benefited from quite a lot of work that went in and quite a lot of political risk that was taken by the previous administration. In terms of the way we use it now, We've obviously shown that it can be used for buses, which really benefits some of the most disadvantaged people in the city. That's still a very urgent need. I would be concerned if a lot of it went towards developing proposals that benefited, shall we say, the councillors from the wealthier areas of the city there. And that didn't actually meet the needs of some of the people who are really struggling, haven't actually got many options actually to green their transport. I proposed this before, that we actually look at do a map of the city and work out how many different options people have got to go low carbon transport. In some areas people can use the bike, they have already got lots of bus services. There are other areas where we're asking people to reduce the carbon impact of their transport. But the reality is they have absolutely no options at all because we're not providing them other than the car. So if we're going to invest CAS money in encouraging people to keep cars when they've already got bus services, they can cycle, etc., etc., we need to give consideration to whether that's the best use of the money.
Okay, noted. I do know that WECA are bringing forward some work to map accessibility, particularly around public transport, so I think that's something that we'll look at very carefully. And I do hope that actually there will be, these things are meant to cover their costs, but if we are repaying CAS, once we've repaid it, then I'd like to think that any excess will be invested in sorts of equitable things that you talk about.
Obviously, but there is a short and long-term discussion there, isn't there? If we're going to a business case that is going to come into profit in 3 or 4 years' time, is not going to help people who haven't got a bus service out on the edge of the city at the moment, and for whom cycling is not a physical possibility, or they have to work at night, or they're female and it's too risky.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, this is just for noting, so I'm going to say that the committee notes the report. I'm assuming that Adam will just take note of any, particularly around developments and the other things that have been mentioned. Should we move on now? Next one is Task and Finish Group, curbside and parking to Task and Finish Group. This is just to update members on progress to date with parking, curbside, Task and Finish Group. It's a non-key decision update report, so no vote. I don't know, Rob, do you want to talk to this?
Yeah, I think it's me. Thanks, Chair. So yeah, I'm the chair of the Curbside and Parking Task and Finish Group. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the group, all of the councillors who've been involved, who've really honed what the group has been working on and made it a better piece of work, I think. And the officers, obviously, who've been working hard on this and continue to work hard on this and will do over the summer. Also want to thank the stakeholders that we've been encountering and talking to. Some of whom have attended and many more have filled in a recent survey to give us feedback on the initial objectives, which I'll just quickly list now. So the objectives for the curbside and parking strategy are safer and more accessible streets, healthier streets, accessible streets, resilient streets and welcoming streets. And we have in the papers today, if you want to go and read them, you can see a bit more detail about what that means in practice. It was great to attend sessions of the One City Transport Board and the Disabled People Strategic Transport Advisory Group to get further input and feedback and in some cases critique. We are taking these more challenging issues that people raise on board. That's being noted, and we're thinking about ways that we can incorporate those changes as we move through. Public consultation on the strategy will occur later in 2025 with an aim to get a draft strategy to committee in early 2026. And just to conclude, a reminder of why it's needed. So 26% of households do not have access to a car. I'm not saying the strategy will give 26% of space over to the uses. That remains to be decided. But there is an argument for that. At root, this is about spatial inequality and an effective implementation of change. If we can get a solid strategy and a practical implementation plan, we can create streets that are more centred around the needs of the community and not just centred around storage of private vehicles, important as that still is for many. So that's a summary of sort of where we're up to. You can read more in the papers about the exact timeline we've followed and the meetings that we've had. I'm happy to take questions. But yeah, that's where we're up to at the moment. And at the big thing, I suppose, that I haven't mentioned is the officers and partners that are working on this are looking at mapping, the entirety of Bristol's streets, basically, to see the curbside of Bristol streets, to see what they're made up of and what we've currently got there, so that we can make an assessment about how we might want to change that slightly. So that's where we're at. Yeah.
Emma, Kaz, intern.
I would just like to register my thanks to Rob for being a great chair. He's done a really good job of bringing in stakeholders, as that list just mentioned, and we've had some really lively discussions. We want to carry on this piece of work. The officers have been brilliant, and yeah, thanks for steering it, Rob.
Yeah, I've been part of this task and finish group, and I think we can all agree it's a very important issue, so I'm glad that Rob is chairing it and we're having this kind of discussion. When we started, there was a lot of focus on Lambeth, and this had an area with a strategy for the curbside. I pointed out that Bristol isn't Lambeth. We don't have a public transport infrastructure of a London borough, and nor do we have the legal powers to prevent pavement parking. So I welcome the interventions of yourself, Ed, to write to the DFT about pavement parking. I also note that just last week the low traffic neighbourhood in Lambeth was ruled unlawful by the High Court. There are other councils such as Portsmouth which have a parking strategy document, so I hope that we do eventually get to a strategy document. And I think that, it's important that we know what the deliverables and timescales are to finish this task. I believe this one was planned to the last 12 months, so looking forward to carrying on and seeing where we get to.
Thank you. I'm going to recommend that we note this report and look forward to the approach and next steps outlined in the paper, and wish all power to Rob Zelbo in shepherding us to a conclusion of that task and finish group. We are getting to the closing straight of this. So the last, penultimate agenda item 19 is workplace parking levy update. Once again, the purpose of this report is to report for information on the workplace parking levy project to help the committee understand the key milestones for stage 1 development and the outline business case of the project. It's for information only. The reason we're bringing this is because I did make a commitment to the Labour group that we would be bringing key milestone information at each of the key milestones as we move through the project. And I want really, this is just to make sure that you're content with the way we've set out those milestones and that they give us the scrutiny required. I don't know if you want to add to this.
Yeah, so the report sets out lots of stuff about workplace parking levies, which is very useful. What we've done in essence since the previous meeting is we've got resource working on it, but we've also set out a project plan which starts at point 9. So there's 5 different stages. We're looking at supporting studies and information, surveys and data collection, modelling, forecasting and impact assessments, scheme development, and then package and final OBC. So we will bring update reports to committee at appropriate times based on those 5 key points. I think in reality it will be the final 3 that will be of interest to committee. So once we have collected data, this is what the modelling looks like, this is what the scheme development is looking like, and then this is what the package is looking like, to get committee's input at those key points. We're not going to say we'll come to every committee. We'll bring it at the specific times when those update points are pertinent, and then the report sets out what each of those different points will be doing. If committee members have any thoughts on the paper and any thoughts on those different points, quite happy to have those either now or sent to me at a later point. And then we will book in our next visit to committee when we've progressed the first 2 points, I would suggest.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think we set out our stall quite clearly when this first got going, that we, there are certain groups that we feel should be excluded from a workplace parking levy, but I understand you're going to do the data collection, across the whole area, but just want to sort of get reassurance that you'll be able to break that data down into different groups so that we'll be able to identify a scheme with and a scheme without certain groups in it when it comes to the point of saying this would be a viable scheme or this wouldn't.
Yeah, that's certainly the intention, and obviously we'll also set out what we expect the zone size to be, and who it will include as well.
Thank you. My feedback is to say, keep going with this, and if possible, faster. Drive the programme at the beginning of the process rather than at the end, because this is where we've got have the most opportunity to make sure that we deliver on time.
I echo that. We note the report, and I'm glad that Adam was able to say yes to your request, Tim. So last of all, we have the risk report. Which is to provide an update on current significant strategic risks to achieving our objectives, and it summarises progress in managing the risks and actions taken at Q4 relevant to this committee. One of the things I would be like, this is a non-key decision update report only. One of the things I'd like to be doing as we move forward in this committee and updating the corporate plan is having a bit greater visibility of the sort of risks that sit just below the corporate risk register, because we've noted a number of risks today, CRSTS construction period being one that is very high on all of our radars, but it doesn't appear on this because it's being well managed, and therefore it doesn't actually, the final score doesn't hit that. But I think we need to be assuring ourselves that risks like that are being well managed, and we get a bit more visibility rather than just the way that this is presented at the moment. I think that's a challenge for all of us to do that well. Sorry, Adam, I'm probably stealing your thunder.
Well, I was just going to say we had a portfolio review meeting earlier this week and discussed the risk issue that you've raised. We do have a portfolio risk report, so it might be that that's something we could circulate to committee members in the first instance for comments and any issues, and then if you did want to incorporate that into quarterly reviews at committee or something, then I think that would be quite a suitable document to use. But obviously we have the formal risk process with the corporate risks as well that we need to consider.
I get the benefit once again of delivering this report, but I was going to say that I understand as part of the review into the committee system, it's looking at how risk papers are prepared. Of course, we're looking at Q4 up until mid-March because of the timing, and we're of course well into Q1 of the following year. I think we need to be mindful of the organisation's overall approach to managing risk. There is a risk management framework for a reason, so it feels, I don't want to say anything to undermine that, but I think where we have, we've discussed certain risks tonight around mitigation of works at the same time, that as the owner of the programme, it feels right that we were able to provide you with more information on that, as Adam has suggested.
Certainly wouldn't want to undermine the overall organisation risk management approach, but I think just giving a bit more visibility so that the members of this committee can assure themselves that that our anxieties and about certain risks are indeed being well managed.
Indeed, and I'll pick that up with the monitoring officer and the Section 151 officer. In relation to this report, again, it's an update. You'll see paragraphs 12 through to, if you can call them paragraphs, through to 17. There's not an awful lot of change presented in this paper, but just to note, there's a materialised risk in relation to the condition of our sort of infrastructure assets. So that's around our highways, traffic, parking and docks infrastructure. We know we have an ancient city. We know we have a depreciating asset, and that's exhibiting. And then it also notes that there's some a mitigating action in relation to each of the two risks identified that make it into this report have been achieved, as well as returning back to that risk. CRR 58 has now remained static for a complete 4 quarters cycle because of, as we know, the depreciating condition of our assets. I'm not sure there's much more to add to it.
Thanks, Chair, and congratulations, Alex, on your new appointment. It's been a tough evening for you, but done very well. On risk management, unfortunately, this is something I have to do in my day job, and we do risk reviews every single month, and it can be quite a painful process, but the idea is it's supposed to be a useful one. And I wonder if the way that the committee could engage with this is differently from how we do now, where we see a report which is somewhat time delayed every now and again, and we just nod it through at the end of the meeting. Rather, we have a workshop outside of the committee structure to go through what's on the current risk register, not that just the top line, but the lines below it, and also bring in our own ideas, where we think what actually is our perception of a risk that the council faces in the area of transport and connectivity, and then reassure ourselves that that has been expressed on the risk register in some way, or add value to the process, adding in a risk that no one had thought of. So we could get involved in a much more meaningful way in this, or not at all, because what we're doing right now isn't especially productive in my view.
We actually have, in June, we've got a workshop. We've had 2 of them already to sort of set our forward plan for the next 6 months, and I was considering using part of that to do that kind of process that you were talking about, Nick. So I don't know if there's, I think that would be quite good use of that time, because I think actually we've got quite a packed agenda already and quite a busy forward plan. So rather than necessarily adding a lot more to the forward plan, it might be a really good use, at least for part of that time, to do exactly what you've just described there. So that's maybe something that we could just think about setting up for, I think it's towards the end of June, isn't it? One of those meetings where we all sit in a circle in the big conference room next door and try not to hear all the other committees doing the same thing at the same time. Was it Kaz? Did you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to agree with Nick that I spent my career doing risk analyses, and they're very painful, but I think the more people you get in the room, the more likely you are to understand what the risks are, and to be able to have people come in with ideas that can mitigate those risks. So I welcome this proposal.
I think that just adds to what I just said, so thank you. If we could, officers, rather than necessarily piling on a lot more pressure on ourselves just to sort of dream up things that we might put on the forward plan, let's think about how we might use our time productively when we're looking at things like risks. Shall we, is that... Any other comments? I'm seeing a lot of nods to that idea, so I think that's something we're going to do. Okay, well, we note the risk report for now, albeit that with all its strengths and weaknesses, the strength of the process and maybe the weakness of the visibility, note the report as per the recommendation, and I'm going to bring this meeting to a close. So thank you all very much for your attendance. The next meeting of the Transport Connectivity Policy Committee is 5 p.m. on the 11th of July 2025. I think we've got another packed agenda then as well. So I look forward to seeing you all then.